Hey guys, this is Alt Shift X, and I'm talking about Dune with a special guest. Welcome, Quinn from Quinn's Ideas. Thanks for coming, man.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk about Dune. It's been a while since we've had a chat about Dune, and looking forward to the fun today.
Yeah, me too. We spoke a year ago after the release of Dune Part 1, and now we have all this juicy Dune Part 2 stuff to talk about. Two trailers, uh,
Two whole trailers.
which have some like interesting, surprising stuff in them that I wasn't expecting.
hmm
Like some of that Irulan stuff surprised me. What
Looks like she's
surprised
getting
you?
an expanded role. Um, what surprised me? I don't know if I was like totally surprised more than I was just like, oh, it's cool to see that. It was cool to see what you have up on the screen right now, like the nuke thing.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting them to show that in the trailer at all. So that was an interesting thing to see because that's kind of like a oh crap when that's happening in the book a little bit.
yeah. There's a lot of stuff in the trailers where I was like, oh wow, like they're showing that. That's kind of spoilery.
I
Um,
think they're probably banking on people not really knowing what it is because I don't think that I think they're probably banking on people not having read the books really.
yeah, because that's the thing. Like, because we've read the books, we recognize what things are and how significant they are. But people who haven't read the books, it's just like, oh, it's just an explosion. Like, I don't know what
It's
that
just an
means, so it's
explosion.
fine. Um, the previous videos I did were like no spoiler videos, but I want to say that this is a spoilery live stream, so we will talk about
Spoilerific.
what happens at the end. So you have been warned, which means that we get to talk about some of the implications of some of what's going on in these trailers and what they might mean. I mean, if we want to start with the explosions, I mean, I was surprised by how many there are. Like I guess this huge explosion on screen right now is the destruction of the shield wall, which is how Paul lets all the sandworms in to attack the Emperor. Um,
It seems to be. No, I did hear before the release of the trailer, I'd heard the rumor that the second part was going to have a lot more action, be a lot more heavy on the action. And that
yeah,
seems to be what the trailer, especially the second one they released, definitely shows.
yeah. Villeneuve said in some interview that, like, yeah, this is an epic, action-packed war movie, which I wonder if that's like if like the studio was saying that we need to make this more exciting, because like one of the most common criticisms I heard of Dune Part One was that it was boring for some people, like it felt very slow and contemplative, and so I wonder if the studio was like, well, focus group testing says we need more explosions because people keep falling asleep in this movie. We need more action. I wonder if that's what they were doing.
Yeah, I think maybe that was a part of it, but I also feel like it might have always been the intention. Because I
Yeah.
think Frank Herbert even described Dune as having like what he called a colloidal rhythm. I think that was just a term that he kind of invented, which was that
A
it starts
coital
off
rhythm. Yeah.
or something like that. I must have said it wrong. Yeah, it's I guess it's like it increases gradually as the story goes on and it kind of like gets to this crescendo. So I feel like maybe that was always a part of Villeneuve's plan. And then um, that's why the first movie is a little slower because it's
Yeah.
like this is just the beginning of the film. Because I think Villeneuve really sees it as one movie. I don't think he really sees it as Dune Part One, Dune Part Two.
Yeah. Yeah. He's emphasized in interviews that it's not a sequel, it's a continuation, it's a second part. And yeah, you're right. Like the book does have a slow first half and a sudden explosive ending. So it does kind of make sense. And I mean, also like it all depends on how they edit the trailer, right? Like it seems like the movie's full of explosions and fight scenes, but maybe those are just the bits that they've included in the trailer, depending on how they edit it. Um, maybe they showed us like most of what the fight scenes and stuff are, and maybe the movie itself will be a little slower than this trailer seems.
Yeah, I think it's also it relates to like the difference between the way Frank Herbert writes and the way like cinema necessarily has to be. Because in Dune, like the violence is always understated. There'll be battles that happen off screen. Like that's not the point, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
when it comes to a film, especially like an epic sci-fi movie, it's kind of like you need to show it. You need to show more of the battles, probably. You need to show more of the explosions. to emphasize like the cost of it all, that there's life being lost. It's not like, yeah, it's not like a book where you're reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Hmm.
And I mean the book does that to an extent that is sh- almost frustrating. Like there's that bit
Yeah.
where um 2 years pass and we get back to Paul, and Paul is like high and he's tripping and he doesn't know when or where he is, and he remembers, oh yeah, like Chani came in the room the other day and
Hmm.
said that she killed someone, or Hara said that Chani killed a man who wanted to
A
challenge you.
challenger.
And Paul's like, oh my god, Chani, you killed someone? And she's like, yeah, no, it's nothing, it's no big deal. And it just happens off screen, and Paul's kind of like shook by it. um and that's like all we get in terms of Chani fighting in the entire Dune book.
Yeah.
Whereas this movie is now showing us, she's doing this crazy action sequence where she's like bouncing around and fighting all these Sardaukar in the final battle, and it's so different. I mean, and it's
Yeah.
satisfying to
It,
see her in action because the book tells her that the book tells us that she's a badass fighter. Now we get to actually see it.
yeah, and it's awesome to see it. And you made me think too, it's interesting how in the book we don't really see Chani fight, but still I have this image of her as like this kind of badass fighter warrior just because of the way like she's presented in especially that first book. And yeah, in the second book too, she still has that vibe. But yeah, it's awesome to actually see it in action. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. And I think a few people have pointed out how this shot in particular parallels the shot that we got of Paul and the first
yeah,
trailer from his vision.
yeah.
So that's an interesting thing that they've done. I wonder like what the implication of that is.
Well, it almost makes me wonder if this shot is in fact another
A
vision,
vision.
not reality.
Yeah.
Um, like I wonder if this is a nightmare that Paul is having, where he's seeing his precious beloved Chani in this dangerous situation, because there's also the shot of him like screaming her name, and it has the feeling of a nightmare to me. Um,
I I get what you mean. Yeah, it makes me wonder if yeah, he's just seeing like a possible future. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe this is crazy speculation tenfold, but maybe he's like seeing a future where like he maybe dies and then Chani is like enraged and like gives her life on the battlefield fighting in his name or something like that. I don't
yeah,
know.
and I think that doing weird stuff like that would be totally in keeping with the way that the book handles visions, because like as
Hmm.
I said, like there's that chapter where we are in Paul's head, and Paul doesn't know what's real. Like Paul is so overwhelmed by the spice and by his visions that he's like, I
Hmm.
don't know if this is a memory that happened in the past or a vision that happened in the future. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's real, and the reader doesn't know what's real. And so if
Yeah.
if the trailer gives us shots, perhaps like this, and we as viewers are like, is this reality or is this a vision? That would be great. Like we
Yeah.
should be disoriented, and we should be like activating our brains and thinking like trying to figure out what's real in the same way that Paul is. I think that would be really interesting if they played with that.
I do think that would be really interesting. Just like I really enjoy that type of cerebral visualization type thing in like science fiction. And I think that's something that I think like 1970s sci-fi is like really like good for.
Yeah.
Is that it's just their way of visually representing esoteric or abstract things like that. And I think yeah, it'd be cool if to see some of that in Villeneuve's Dune Part 2.
Yeah, totally. That's something that I think the previous adaptations, like the '84 Lynch movie and the 2000 sci-fi miniseries, did like a fairly good job of, was like doing that like trippy, crazy vision psychedelic stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's important because it is in the book, like when Jessica does the water of life ceremony, and there's this incredibly trippy sequence where Jessica's like, whoa, I can see the mind of my unborn child Aaliyah, and I'm connecting with Romallo, and we're sharing our brains, and
Mhm.
it's incredibly psychedelic, and I'm really curious to see how Villeneuve does that in Dune Part 2.
I'm super excited to see how he does it. And you know, honestly, here's something I would say that might surprise people is that I'd be excited to see how David Lynch would have done that now with modern technology. Because when
Yeah.
it comes to David Lynch, he's all about the trippy, cerebral, weird visualizations of stuff. I don't know if you've seen or heard of Twin Peaks, but
Yeah.
that's like it's his magnum opus to me. It's just so freaking weird. The way he portrays like interdimensional beings or whatever is so bizarre. So I'd love to see what his would look like. But
Yeah.
Villeneuve, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that's visualized because I think a lot of people or a few people have been saying like, oh, maybe Aaliyah's not going to be in the movie, and I'm like, I feel like it would be almost impossible to not have Aaliyah as a character in this movie. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
it's going to be interesting.
And Aaliyah has
Um,
already been in the movie. Aaliyah was in the first movie. In that
mhm,
vision, we got to see baby Aaliyah. So it's like there's no way they're
yeah.
not going to include Aaliyah at this point, surely.
So I'm wondering too if we're gonna get like some like weird CGI visualization of like of a fetus or something.
Yeah,
Is
right.
it because in the book it's described as so like trippy. She's like in this like weird mind space and she can see the wild Reverend Mother and she's communicating with her and she kind of like looks inside of herself and she's like, "Oh, you're pregnant. You didn't tell us that that you were pregnant. This is gonna change the baby too." So
Yeah.
like I feel like that's a scene. I feel that scene's important for the audience to understand why Aaliyah comes out the way she does.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like in Dune Part One, Villeneuve's approach to the strangeness and the trippiness of Dune has been, I think, very understated. Like I thought it was
Hmm.
good when the big egg Imperial ship came down and the weird like masked, robed spacing guild people came out, and it was like very strange and evocative that moment. And I think that did like a good job of the weirdness, but it was an understated weirdness. Whereas like the
Yeah.
Aaliyah Water of Life ceremony, it can't be it should not be understated. It should be like in your face, I think, because as you say, like it's not just a vibe; it's a plot point. It is an important
Hmm.
plot point that Aaliyah is exposed to a drug in the womb that opens her mind and gives her 1,000 adult consciousnesses before she's even born, and like it's a very specific plot point that audiences need to understand, that needs to be explained to the audience. And like, are they going to actually explain it, or are they going to leave it to you and me to explain it to people on YouTube? Because
Yeah.
it's like it's difficult to get that stuff across without really clunky exposition, or like in the Lynch movie when they had voiceovers of the characters thinking. Like it's I think that Villeneuve did a good job of getting that stuff across in the first movie, but there are some very challenging scenes in this next movie that are going to be hard to do without expositing.
Yeah. And also, guys, yes, we are talking about spoilers. But anyway, back to like Aaliyah.
Yeah.
I think what's important too, if I don't know how they would get this across or how they would visualize this, but it should be emphasized the great pain that baby Aaliyah's consciousness is in at this point in time. Because
Yeah.
she's literally being crushed by the weight of ancestral memories. All of these fully developed adult voices like screaming in her mind from the time that she's like first conscious. So
Yeah.
I hopefully Villeneuve does something to emphasize that. Or at least like when viewing the scene, we should be of the understanding that this is kind of a dark, twisted thing that's happening now. Yes, like Jessica's being elevated to her next level of consciousness. Yes, she's becoming a Reverend Mother, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a dark thing also that's being imposed upon the child, and I think that should be emphasized because it's like I think based on the trailer too, this movie is going to emphasize Paul's pain and resentment towards Jessica a bit more so than Dune itself does. And
Yeah.
I feel like it would be great to also show how Jessica, in doing what she does, has also harmed her daughter. Because that's a big part of Children of Dune. And I don't know if we're going to get to ever see that in cinematic form. But yeah, it
Yeah.
all builds on itself.
Yeah, I think one of the bits I really enjoyed in Dune Part One was when Paul gets angry at Jessica and is set and he's yelling at his mother, saying, "You Benny Gesserit made me a freak,"
Hmm.
and that is something that is so real in the book as well, where Jessica feels this guilt at
Yeah.
what she has made her son into. And as an aside, like I sort of recently saw some takes online that were arguing that, like, in book three, Children of Dune, Jessica's relationship with Farad'n was something that I never quite
Hmm.
understood, because there's this plotline in book three when Jessica's training this boy to be like a Bene Gesserit, and it's sort of about making the remnants of House Carino into a non-threat. But at the time, I didn't really understand what the point of that relationship was, and I saw people online arguing that it's like Farad'n becomes like a surrogate son for Jessica,
Hmm.
because Jessica's relationship with her son Paul is broken. Like, after the events
Yeah.
of Dune, Jessica just leaves, and we don't see her for the entire second book, and like she just severs her relationship with her son while he's being emperor, and because she just can't handle what he has become.
And also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go on.
I was just gonna say, and also like, I feel like the exact quote, but I think she was referring to Aaliyah in this particular quote. She says, "I fled in terror of what I had created."
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, whoa, it's like, no, she gets it. She gets what she's like kind of unleashed upon the world, not just with Paul, but with Aaliyah as well. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see her guilt and to see her like question what she's done and feel remorse. And yeah, her training Faradin is kind of a way of like, I don't know, maybe she's thinking a little bit, let me do this right. Maybe I can create something that's not like
Yeah.
monstrous potentially.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the implication. She's like, "Well, I messed my son and my daughter up beyond repair. Maybe this child, this Carino child, I can put on a better path." Um, I think that's the
Hmm.
implication, and it's so dark and strange, but I think they can do it. Like, I really like Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Jessica, and
Yes,
I think that part of why she does such a great job of Jessica is that, like, I was watching Silo, this new TV show. Have you seen that with Rebecca
I've been
Ferguson?
watching it as well. Hmm.
Yeah, I've only seen the first few episodes, but like she has a very similar performance to Dune, where it's all about like she is someone who's trying to sort of stay calm and in control, but you can see that she has so much intense emotion bubbling just below the surface that she's just sort of
Yeah.
holding within herself, and it's this incredibly amazing performance where it's just so apparent how much depth and turmoil is going on within her. And I think that's perfect for Jessica, because the challenge of Dune is, how do you visually represent the internal turmoil? And I think that Rebecca Ferguson is a master of that specific kind of acting. Simmering anxiety, says Disco J in the live chat, and I think
I
that it.
definitely agree.
Yeah, go on.
I agree with, I think Rebecca Ferguson's performance in Dune is excellent. And I've seen people say she's too emotional. Benny Gesserit shouldn't be emotional. Shut up, you're wrong.
Yeah,
Actually, Benny Gesserit totally have emotions. The whole thing is like when other people are around, they're not going to show you who they are. Like all the times you really see Jessica with her walls down in the original Dune, and like she's alone or she's with Paul, and she can open up to Paul a little bit. I don't know. So I feel like she did a very good job of like towing that line. She
yeah,
is full of emotion. She is full of like anxiety. Like from the opening scene of Dune, like she doesn't know if her son is gonna die or not. So I don't know.
yeah.
I love Rebecca Ferguson's portrayal. I always say Jessica Ferguson. It's so
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've also seen people saying, "Oh, Jessica's too emotional in the movie. Bene Gesserit are unemotional." You read the books; they are full of emotion, and the books are constantly saying, "And then Jessica used her Bene Gesserit breathing exercises to calm her mind," and like it very
Mhm.
explicitly is saying that all the characters are constantly wrestling for control of their emotions and using
Mhm.
Bene Gesserit philosophy to do so. No one in these books is a robot. The
Yeah.
Butlerian Jihad happened for a reason. There are no robots. Everyone is deeply human. Even the God Emperor Worm God, Leto the Second, the most inhuman
Really the
character.
most human.
Yeah, he's the most human at the same time. And that's what these
Uh-huh.
books are about. These books are about striving to transcend our human weaknesses, striving to unlock our human potential, but at the same time to retain our humanity. And it's about that tension. It's about how do we be better, smarter, stronger? How do we survive? But how do we also retain that kernel of humanity
Humanity.
that makes us who we are?
And that's an interesting question that a lot of science fiction deals with. And Dune deals with it in a really interesting way because a lot of science fiction, they take this idea about maintaining humanity and they look at it from like, I don't know, like a genetic engineering standpoint or like a transhumanism standpoint, where it's like, if you replace all the parts, when are we no longer human? But Dune deals with it on like an on the standpoint of, I think, I don't know, slow guided evolution.
Yeah.
And it's like it's about like I think Dune is about like picking out what the traits of humanity that make us human. You know what I mean? Because the Bene Gesserit have certain things that they care about more than other things, right? So the Bene Gesserit are totally not down with like something like artificial insemination. They feel like that's a step too far. They're not down with things like direct genetic manipulation. They feel like that's a step too far, but they will like breed in certain genes that they like through the natural way. So it's always about how do you stay human and how do you evolve without taking it a step too far. And I feel like the way Dune handles it is very unique, and I haven't quite seen anything similar, really.
Yeah. And obviously, like, the Tleilaxu are a meditation
Hmm.
on that, because the
Yeah,
Tleilaxu are these genetic engineers who tinker at the biology and the genetic underpinnings of humanity. And I like how we got a slight hint at that vibe with the monstrous spider creature
oh
that
yeah,
we saw in part one.
one definitely of Tleilax suit design.
Yeah, because like they did not need to like tell us anything about what that spider monster is. It just told us that in this universe there are abominations of a biological genetic nature. Like that is a possibility that is lurking at the corners of this universe, and that is something that we should fear. You know?
And if you look at how the Tleilax were presented in the book, it's very clear that Frank Herbert is framing this as like a kind of a negative, dark thing, because they're kind of considered the dirty Tleilaxu, the strange Tleilaxu,
Yeah.
xenophobic, tampering with all sorts of horrible things. And then way later in the book, we get to see their axolotl tanks for the first time, and the truth of it is like very horrifying and it's very disturbing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're framed as like abominations. They're framed as abomination.
Which is like not to mention the revelations in the later books when they're like, oh, by the way, the Tleilaxu deliberately pretended to be stupid and gross, but they
Yeah,
actually are secretly like a secret immortal Muslim
yeah,
cult. Very confusing
yeah.
things going on in the later books with like with Waff and
The
his.
Tleilaxu cult is so interesting. That's some of the most interesting stuff in Heretics of Dune, especially seeing their interactions with the Bene Gesserit, with the Reverend Mother, how she just kind of like toys with the Master using religion. Because like that to me, in Heretics of Dune, that's like the best. Those are some of the best scenes where you get to see like hands-on how the Bene Gesserit manipulate through religion, how they just kind of rope the Tleilaxu around their little finger. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
But that's really deep in the series, so we're not getting into that.
Yeah, let's try and stick to the first book for now, I guess. Um, Thanks for the donation from the Booty Bamboozler, who says, hey guys, I read the main 6 Dune books after your last stream and really enjoyed them. Is there anything you hope they change from the book for this movie? I'm curious what they do with Aaliyah. What do you hope that they change in these
well,
books?
well, there's certain things that I already know they're changing that I like, which is the bigger role for Princess Irulan. I think she'll
Yeah,
have more agency in the ultimate decision at the end. I think that's one thing they're going to change. I don't feel like it's just going to be like, oh, Paul says he wants her and he just gets her. I feel like she'll probably be like, okay. I mean, I feel like she'll have more agency. I'm down for the expanded role of Chani. So that's cool.
yeah,
I don't know if I have any direct hopes. Oh, one thing. I would love this. This is just kind of like a wish. I would love to see Villeneuve's take on a guild navigator. He doesn't have to show that because it's not really in the book. We don't really see a guild navigator until the next book,
yeah.
but I would love to see one. I would love to see it.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, like, yeah, the first book doesn't have a creepy fish man in a tube, like was in the Lynch movie. But I think that so many people are expecting it because of the Lynch movie.
Yeah.
Um, so I would be surprised if they didn't include it.
It'd be easy to do because the guild is coming to Arrakis at the end of the book. So I mean, you have your opportunity.
And I feel like there's
Everyone's coming to Arrakis.
and I feel like Villeneuve has almost already done a guild navigator in Arrival, right? Because
You're right. Yeah.
Arrival is that adaptation of that wonderful Ted Chiang short story, and it's about this linguist communicating with an alien, and the alien is a strange monster inside this gaseous,
Octopod.
cloudy space that we only see vaguely through the mist, and it's very similar to how guild navigators appear. So he could easily like transfer some of those ideas into a depiction of the navigators.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Villeneuve's dark, twisted take on what a guild navigator looks like.
Yeah, I think that could be really cool. Um,
Because we haven't had like a good design. I don't know. Some people hate the David Lynch design, but we haven't had like a reasonable design. I feel like a reasonably good looking design since the David Lynch one, because the sci-fi miniseries one doesn't necessarily work. I don't think it looks good at all. But the David Lynch one, it looks like this mutated creature. Like you can say that at the very least. It looks like a mutated creature, something that's really old and that's been mutated by spice. So yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Like the Lynch navigator looks a bit too much like a piece of human anatomy that's been stuck in a jar to me, and I'm not going to say
Looks like
which
a
piece of human anatomy.
looks like several, but
Yeah, it's very ugly, which I guess is like
it's
kind of part of the
off-putting.
point. Yeah, I hate its mouth orifice thing. Like the more you
Yeah.
look at it, the worse this thing is. Um, I think this like 2003 Children of Dune miniseries is like fairly faithful. I mean, it's
It's closer for sure
yeah, like it's
to the book
the CGI has aged badly, but in terms of like faithfulness to the book, I think this is pretty close to what the Navigators should look like.
because they're described as having like the webbed hands and just kind of like fishmen swimming around. Because Edric isn't like some fat, big-headed guy that's like bro, 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 bro. He can move around in his tank. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's like quite human-like, and that I think is
yeah,
like part of what is fun. Like Scatale is Edric, sorry, is like a funny character because he's like kind of pathetic, and he's the guy at the
yeah.
meeting who everyone is like putting shit on because he's not very smart, and he's only there to like shield everybody from Paul's prescience, and so
Now
like yeah,
that's the
go on.
scene I want to see adapted. I would love to see that scene that you're talking about from Dune Messiah, where they're all just sitting around. You got the Bene Gesserit, you got the princess, you got the guild navigator, you got
Yeah.
the face dancer. That's something I would love to see.
Yeah. I think we've talked before about how hilarious we both find that scene. Um,
It's so silly, but like so awesome at the same time.
and
It's something that only could have come out of like 60s, early 70s sci-fi. But
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, it's like the Mos Eisley Cantina, just like these goofy, gooby looking dudes in rubber suits just having a business meeting, and it's just hilarious. Which you know, I kind of struggle to imagine Villeneuve doing that in such a goofy way, and that's one of like the questions for me about the Dune Part Two movie is are they going to capture the goofiness of like specifically the ending of Dune? Because like yeah, we've talked before about how funny we find it, like the dialogue with like Aaliyah and the Emperor when he's going on
she's like
about like
talking shit, sassing him.
yeah, she is just this 2-year-old child is just sassing the Emperor of the Universe, and he is not understanding what is going on. And there's all this dialogue. Are you reading my mind? And like it's all this completely comedic, farcical. It's a farce, and that is such a break from the tone of especially the Dune Part One movie, which is so much like this serene, beautiful, contemplative, philosophical, visually beautiful movie. So like how will Villeneuve handle these more ridiculous scenes in the movie? Will he keep the ridiculousness of it, or will he make it more sort of serious? You know?
I've often thought about how he's going to handle the Emperor meeting Aaliyah scene with the Reverend Mother and all that. And I think he could keep that scene and I think he could do it, but I do think he would have to significantly change the tone I think that you just got to make Aaliyah more creepy, make things more dark, make the Emperor less, oh, what's going on? Uh, and make the Reverend Mother like less reactionary, screaming, "Oh, kill her, kill her." I
Yeah.
don't know, just tone things down a bit. I could see him like brushing his tone over the whole thing and giving it a nice Villeneuve coating to make
Yeah.
it let to like kind of tone down the goof factor just a little bit. If you watch the David Lynch version of that scene, the David Lynch version of that scene is freaking hilarious. I'm pretty sure it's unintentional, but the way the Baron dies in that movie is so funny. He like floats out like screaming and like does a bunch of tumbles and he just like floats out into the distance after Leah poisons him and like the wall breaks open right at the right moment. It's like a sitcom or something.
He's like a popped balloon careening around the room, letting its air out.
It's
Yeah,
completely ridiculous.
I included that shot at the start of the real Dune video that I did, because it is just the most concise way to show the complete ridiculousness of the Lynch movie. So yeah, I mean, like,
Absolutely.
I hope that they capture some of that ridiculousness in the movie, but as you say, like, I think it's more likely that Villeneuve just makes it a bit more serious and like tones that down a little bit, which, you know, like, I think there's a risk that that takes away part of the point of the ending of the book, because I think part of the point of the ending is that it's just weird and sort of anticlimactic and unsatisfying for
Hmm.
everybody involved. But like, I think that, you know, studios and audiences may expect and may want a more satisfying, more climactic ending, and so I sort of worry that, you know, that they may go too far in trying to make it more the same to other stories. You know, give
Yeah.
us the expected endings, because like in the trailer we see Gurney Halleck facing Beast Raban, and so like it looks like
Yeah.
there's going to be a final fight where Gurney gets to kill Raban. But like, I think part of the point of the book is that Gurney's like, "Hey Paul, let me fight Fade. You promised me I'll get revenge against the Harkonnens." And Paul's like, "Nah, you're not going to get that."
You don't get it. Yeah. Well, it's like I understand the pressure to give in, to like the audience pressure. Sometimes people just really want Clegane Bowl and you got to give it to them. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Villeneuve is gonna mainly do what he wants. I don't deny that the studio is definitely gonna have like some input, and I feel like if they did like do like I don't know like a test screening and people hated the ending, I don't doubt that they would have like uh, added additional scenes in or additional moments to make things more climactic and epic. And I don't necessarily mind that kind of thing because like I said, it's kind of the natural trade-off when it comes to adaptations. You're never gonna get a one-to-one adaptation. It's just like not possible. And certain things just don't translate on screen. Like I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I read through all of Dune, but I'm pretty sure that Raban doesn't die on screen. We kind of hear about it later.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's right.
I think with a movie, we got to see him die. You know what I mean? We can't just hear about it later. We got to see him die. Sorry,
Yeah.
guys. Yes, spoilers. We're doing spoilers today.
Should I put spoilers in the title? Maybe I should put spoilers in the
Perhaps.
title.
I've been seeing people comment.
Um, yeah, I mean, look, it would kind of be fan servicey, but like, part of me would love it if we get to see Josh Brolin do a bunch of flips and cut off Raban's head and do a little dance. Like, sure, like it would be cool and fun. But part of me is also like, wouldn't it be cool if he was fighting Raban and then Raban like got away and Gurney was
Yeah.
real just angry and frustrated, and it's like, why don't I
Hmm.
get the violent vengeance that I want? That might be a way
That
of
would be
like
interesting.
giving us a cool fight scene, but also giving us the sort of deliberate like narrative blue balls that Frank Herbert gives us in the book.
That's what he likes to do. It would be in keeping with what Frank Herbert likes to do for sure.
Yeah. So like, I feel like there are like clever things they could do, but yeah, so many possibilities. Do you want to talk about Chani and like some of the changes they seem to be making with Chani's role?
Yeah, well, definitely she's having like a more expanded role. And I did hear a line for her from her in the trailers, something to the effect of this prophecy is how they control us or something like that, which is
Yeah.
interesting because
Yeah.
Chani in the book is a true believer. At least as far as I can tell, she's a true believer. She believes in Paul. In fact, in the second one, I forget which if it's in Dune or Dune Messiah, but actually she almost like doesn't understand when he can't see something in the future. She's like, I don't understand. Like, can't you just use your power to do it or something?
Yeah.
So it's like, so it's interesting to have her questioning things here because that's definitely an addition. Definitely an addition.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Chani's role in the book is that she's not super engaged with Paul's prophet prescience magic situation. Like, I feel like their relationship is about just being human and grounded and
Hmm.
normal together. Like, there's that. I mean, that's kind of how their relationship starts. Is that Paul's having all these crazy visions, and Chani is there with him. I mean, it's like, someone's
Hmm.
tripping too hard at a party, and she's like, holding Paul's
Tell
hair
me
while
of
he
your home
pukes into
world.
the toilet, like, tell me of your homeworld, Uso. Like, she is grounding him and looking after him, and that's how they get together. Um,
Hmm.
and so, like, I feel like their relationship is founded on her not being overly interested in his magic space Jesus shenanigans. She's just like she just loves the man Paul and he her.
She's she's like his final tie to like humanity.
Yeah,
Because Jessica, as the book goes on, Paul becomes increasingly less human in a way.
yeah,
And I feel like that's part of what like kind of like separates him from Jessica and kind of maybe part of the reason that Jessica like leaves Arrakis. But I think that Shawnee is his one thing that grounds him to his humanity throughout Dune and throughout Dune Messiah up until the very end.
yeah,
So yeah, I
yeah.
see that as part of her role.
She is like the last thread of Paul's humanity through like book two, and so when she spoilers when Chani dies at the end of book two, that's what breaks Paul. And that's why he walks into the desert and tries to commit suicide because like she was the last thread of his humanity. And so when she's gone, he just can't take it anymore.
Can't take it. That's the destruction of Paul Atreides, and that's part of the reason that a lot of people can't hang with Dune Messiah because as far as much as the original Dune kind of blue balls you, it gives you like an ending. It gives you like a climactic ending.
Yeah.
You get your thing. You get your it happens. Dune Messiah is not like that. Dune Messiah
Yeah.
is very much, oh, okay, that's the end of it. And it's very, very deflating and it's very sad to see your hero undone in that
Yeah.
way. And it's something that people are not used to reading. So that to me is the question. I don't know. I don't know how something like that would be adapted. I don't know if you could do just a movie on Dune Messiah, which was part of the reason I think the original miniseries kind of did Dune Messiah and Children of Dune in the same thing. Because to end it on Dune Messiah is like, ah, ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think that Dune 1 has a frustrating, anticlimactic, unsatisfying ending, who boy is Dune Messiah worse? Like, Dune Messiah is so much
Absolutely.
more anticlimactic and frustrating and
And
depressing.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think a faithful adaptation of Dune Messiah as a movie would be fun for anybody. I don't know if it's the movie that anybody needs right now. I don't think studios would like it. I don't think focus group testing would like it. I mean, part of me wants to see it, but I don't think it would be a great use of $100 million or whatever movies cost to make now.
Yeah. Here's the real deal. I think that I don't know if it could happen. I really think that if we were going to continue Dune in the best way possible, it might be what we would have to do is go on the Children of Dune, and then the rest of it is told through like flashbacks, or maybe we have a I don't
Ooh,
know. I don't know. I feel even that might be a little clunky, but like I feel like Dune Messiah doesn't work as a movie. I just know it doesn't, and I love the book, and I
yeah.
love Dune, I love the book, but I don't think it works as a movie. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, well, why not continue as a TV series? Because like
As a TV series.
they are making or were attempting to make a Dune TV show called The Sisterhood. Why not just adapt the following books as a TV show instead, because like this the scale
Hmm.
is smaller in Messiah and as
Yeah.
well compared to Dune. Like it's funny because most book series get the scale increases and the stakes increase as it goes on, but Dune is not quite like that because like all the big giant battles happen in at the end of the first book, whereas the following books are mostly just about a very small cast of characters. And like, yes, Paul is like emperor of the universe, but like we don't really see any large scale stuff in Dune Messiah. It's
What's
mostly just Paul.
what's so awesome about Doom Messiah, and I know this is the same reason that a lot of people hate it, is that the action happens off screen mostly. Like, oh, there's this 10 years or so, I forget exactly how long in between Dune and Dune Messiah, but there's some time in between Dune and Dune Messiah. And in that time space, 60 billion people have died as the result of Paul Atreides' jihad, and we saw none of that. It all
Yeah,
happened off screen. So we were just like throwing in, and here's Paul years later, completely just like riddled with like guilt. He's like completely changed, and it's not the Paul that you remember from the first book. Really, he has changed. Like the one of the first scenes that you get with him is him like denying a constitution and being like, "There will be no constitution. You have no rights,"
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
So it's like, and he compares himself to Hitler, but it's crazy because it's like, what's good about it? It's like, when did this happen? Like I didn't see this happen. It happened off screen. So
yeah.
it's just really interesting the way it's handled.
And it sort of takes you multiple readings of Dune to sort of make sense of it. I think, um, and when you do go back to the first book and you really pay attention, it's sort of like, well, hang on, like the signposting was there. Like when you
The threads were there.
like there's all these little details that like the first time you read Dune, you're like, oh, Muad'Dib made drums out of the human skin of his enemies. Huh,
Yeah.
that's weird. I wonder what that's
Yeah.
about. But then like you get to Messiah and you're like, oh no, that was real. That's really who this guy is. Like he is, this warlord who sterilizes planets, and like yeah, like he doesn't like it and he feels like he has to go along with it, and there's all this. It's complicated, but it
Well,
but
there's
but but
that
all the hints
idea.
are there.
Hmm. And two, there's that idea that that when someone is playing a role in society, when that person is removed from that role, another person steps in to fill it.
Yeah,
And it's almost like Paul has become the thing he was fighting against in the first book. And that's what's devastating. And that is, I think, that's the core of Frank Herbert's point. It's like that's the hero that you were fighting for. But like, I mean, look what happens when you like blindly follow someone. He blindly led all these Fremen to their deaths, led them on this jihad, and then their culture at the end is like in tatters. They're like a pale shadow of what they used to be. It's
yeah.
just it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like the Dune book series is like a bait and switch where it's like, hey guys, do you like sci-fi heroes? Here's a cool sci-fi hero called Paul Atreides, and he's gonna help the Fremen and save the world. It's gonna be awesome. He's gonna beat the evil Harkonnens and Corrinos, and then it suckers you in to thinking that Paul Atreides is a cool guy, and then like the following four books is Frank punishing us for ever thinking that following a hero is a good idea, because it gives you the
Hmm.
jihad and it gives you the oppression of Later the Second, and it gives you all the
Yeah.
consequences. It gives you the Corrinos coming back, and it gives you all of the horrible consequences of Paul's uprising. And so it's all about that central point about the dangers of following a hero. And I'm really glad that the Villeneuve movie seems to be really trying to capture that, and Chani seems to be voicing that by saying the prophecy is how they enslave us, and by looking all cross when Paul plays Messiah. So I'm hopeful that the movie will try to capture that.
I think that one of Frank Herbert's points too is that being a hero or greatness is not consistent. Like it's like someone can be a hero and do a heroic thing at some point. He can liberate the Fremen, but does that mean that person is always going to be a hero? I think that in society we'll have someone that behaves heroically and does a great thing, and so they're labeled a hero by society, and people kind of get this idea that they can do no wrong. So people are very shocked when someone that they've labeled as a hero is now doing wrong things. Because being a hero is not consistent. Being great is not consistent. And I feel like understanding that is key to leadership. And I think that's also a point that Frank Herbert is making. Having like that sense of the sardonic, having the ability to look within yourself and not buy into your own myth is key to actually ruling effectively.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting angles is that part of it is that it's not just about the individual, it's about the broader context. Like Frank is always telling us in Dune to broaden our perspective and see the interconnections, like with his ecology, environment stuff. I think part of the point is that it's saying that like it doesn't really matter whether Paul agrees or disagrees with the jihad and the Fremen Empire. It doesn't really matter what his personal feelings are. What matters is the consequences of his actions, and the jihad is a consequence of his actions. His actions cause disaster whether he feels good about it or not, you know. And so,
Yeah.
and he thinks about how, you know, this will go on with or without me, you know. So it's sort of about how the individual doesn't matter in the face of these broader political and religious forces. Sometimes it's a
What I
more yeah, go on.
I was going to say what I like about that first Dune movie is what I felt was like a was Denis Villeneuve showing us like an exact moment where Paul chooses to go forward on the path. It's the moment where Jessica's like, we can find a way off Arrakis,
Yeah,
and then he says, "No, I'm going to stay,"
yeah,
knowing
yeah,
that staying on Arrakis leads to the jihad. So he makes the decision. He makes the active choice to avenge House Atreides, even though it's going to cause all of this death.
yeah.
So I really like that because it shows his agency.
I agree. I agree so much because yeah, that's like a subtle change that is like quite significant in hindsight, and it's the ending of
Hmm.
the first movie because like in the book, like there's no question that they're gonna stay with the Fremen because that's their only choice. But in the movie,
Hmm.
Jessica is like, hey, let's leave the planet, help us get off the planet, and that's not a thing that happens in the book. But as you say, yeah,
Yeah,
it makes it a choice, and that means that everything that happens afterwards. Is more meaningful because Paul chose it.
yeah,
One
yep.
thing, like you know, in terms of like Paul's subtle turn towards causing atrocities, like there are these like subtle references towards the end of the book where we start to see Paul doing these horrible things that really kind of shocked me on reread. Like right towards the end, before the final battle, it's mentioned like Stilgar and Gurney and Paul are talking, and I think Gurney brings up that, oh, so all those civilians from the villages, all those refugees who came to us, are you still planning on using them as shock troops and cannon fodder and sending them against the Sardaukar? Like, and
Hmm.
Paul's like, oh yeah, we're doing that. We're doing that. We're sending the
We're
civilians
doing
in
it.
as cannon fodder. And Gurney's like, they're all gonna die. Like, you know that, right, Paul? Like, all these civilians are gonna get slaughtered by the Sardaukar. And Paul is like, yeah, that's fine. They know the odds. Like, every Sardaukar they manage to kill is one fewer for us. And it's like, wow,
He doesn't
Paul,
care about the expenditure of human life,
yeah, it's
or at least he's
so
inconsiderate
stark.
of it. Mhm.
Yeah, and like I really hope they include some of that in the movie. I feel like they won't. I feel like they won't have Timothy Chalamet sending civilian refugees to be slaughtered, but it's such an important part of the book that that is where he's headed, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. And it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite, what's now one of my favorite animes, Attack on Titan, and it does a very similar thing
Oh yeah.
with the hero, where he takes this slow turn to being like kind of a genocidal maniac. And I feel like, yeah, so I do see that. Yeah, that's definitely something that's there.
Yeah.
And that darkness from Paul is something that needs to be emphasized so people understand that. Because I still feel like I get people arguing with me that Paul, like, oh, Paul is more innocent than I present in my videos or whatever. I'm like, I really don't think so. I
Yeah.
really think that at some point he made the decision to care about his vengeance more than the life that would be expended.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very much what the book is doing, I think. And it is like not immediately obvious the first time you read it, but And part of it, of course, is the prescience. You know, like Paul sees the future. He feels like it's already happened, and so he's desensitized to the horror because he
Hmm.
has seen billions die in his nightmares constantly, and it's like it's already
Hmm.
happened to him. So it's like, well, of course he doesn't care about a bunch of civilians dying because he knows the stakes, he knows the scale. He is godlike, and that makes you less human, and that is, of course, part of God Emperor of Dune with Leto. You know, power
Hmm.
and knowledge can be dehumanizing, and that's one of this, and that comes back to that central tension of Dune, is that Dune is about attaining knowledge and attaining power and unlocking your potential, but it's also about the dangers of doing so because it makes you less human.
Yeah, and once you become disconnected from the rest of humanity, it's like, I don't know, you become this weird thing that's outside of humanity, which is discussed in God Emperor of Dune a bunch. Um, Leto, he exists within humanity, and yet he is outside of humanity, and that's what makes him like a god, like the
Yeah,
truest god that humanity has ever seen, because he has the history of humanity, all of it within him, and also all of humanity's future like within him.
yeah,
So it's interesting, and it's interesting also to look at the difference between Paul and his son, and how one is able to somehow hold on to the thread of his humanity right up until the very end, even though he's the most inhuman human that's ever existed, and one somehow his humanity drifts away from him, and
yeah,
he's left as like a shell of what he used to be. It's
yeah.
interesting.
There are so many fascinating ironies with Leto the Second, in that, like as you say, like he is a mind made up of human minds. Like he has all the
Hmm.
past human consciousnesses inside him, and there's something ironic about having all these billions of human minds inside him. Is what makes him less human.
Hmm.
It's like the sum is more than the parts. Like being a collective of everything makes you something different to what an individual human mind is. And like also there's the irony of that, you know, Leto, God Emperor Leto does what he does to save humanity. His purpose is to
Hmm.
save humanity from extinction. And the way that he saves humanity is by oppressing and crushing humanity in a inhumane, cruel way. So there's all these sort of ironies and recursions where it's like being inhuman to save humanity, unlocking and increasing your humanity, but losing touch with the humans around you. It's constantly like circling and looping around these questions of what does it mean to be human.
Yeah, Leto the Second had to like instill this message in kind of the collective unconscious, the collective conscious of mankind, and it's this lesson about giving your power over to leaders. But his plan is so multifaceted. Like that's one aspect of it, and then there's the more like I guess like practical aspect of it, which he's trying to shield humanity from some prescient enemy, some vague prescient entity coming into the future, well by literally changing our DNA. But that's the other side of that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the one of many faces, all
The
that.
ones of many faces. It's kind of vague. It's yeah. We could get into a whole long discussion about who Leto's great enemy could potentially be. Let's not open that door right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think we'll have a different stream sometime to talk about
Yeah,
the ending of the later books. But I think you and I both have a suspicion that the great enemy is not Ominous, the evil Skynet robot.
absolutely not.
How about we answer some super chats? Thank you,
Let's do it.
Adam, who says Chani was having dreams about Paul before meeting him. I don't like how part two handles the relationship between the two. Is that true? Does Chani have dreams about Paul before they meet? I don't remember that.
I don't remember that either. Does someone in the chat remember that? Because I'm lost. I don't remember. I don't remember hearing anything about that, unless that's something from the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson stuff.
Yeah,
Because
the
there's some I
prequel
haven't read
books.
all those. I
Yeah,
haven't read all those.
yeah, it's a good point. That might be a Brian Herbert thing.
He
Um,
makes a lot of in between books, so I mean,
Yeah, that's always the danger of prequels and stuff. Everything was foreseen, everything was pre-planned, everything was destined. You do that too much, and it's no longer a story. It's a, you know, it's all
yeah.
prophecy or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
But I mean, in terms of the relationship of Paul and Chani more generally, I mean, I'll note that of course Paul does have dreams of Chani before they meet. Maybe Adam was confused there. But in terms of their relationship generally, like I, I talked about this in the video I just released, where it seems like Paul and Chani have this super interesting tension in the new movie where they love each other and they have this deep personal connection, but they have a political disagreement where Chani believes that the prophecy enslaves the Fremen, which is true. Like, she sees the manipulation of the Bene Gesserit, Lisan al-Gaib stuff. And she looks really angry. Chani looks mad when Paul is playing Messiah. So, like, I'm so curious about what they do with Paul and Chani's relationship when it's like, you know, I love you, but please stop oppressing my culture.
My
like,
people.
oh my God.
That's going to be interesting. I don't think they're going to change it so much where Chani is not still like by Paul's side by the end of it. So I feel like at some point she's going to have to accept what's happening, which will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how she chooses Paul over the Fremen, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I also think that in this movie, they're kind of juxtaposing Chani and Stilgar, where you've got
Yeah.
Stilgar who's like really, really like he just really is believing Paul. And I think the conversation, I think what Chani is saying might be to Stilgar. I think that some of those lines in the trailer, we might be seeing an argument between Chani and Stilgar. Like when he's saying, I don't care, but what you believe is what I believe. I think he's probably talking to Chani rather than Paul. I thought it was Paul at first, but it's probably Chani saying something like, this prophecy is meant to enslave us, and him saying, I don't care what you believe. It's about what I believe. Or maybe that's Paul standing right there. It kind of looks like Paul's hair. I'm not sure.
It's also curious to see Stilgar wounded, incidentally,
Yeah.
because that's
It's like,
like
I think
happen in the book.
It might have been after a battle or something, perhaps.
It really does seem like there's going to be a lot more violence in the movie than is in the book. But yeah, I agree that I think that it is cool and interesting how they're setting up this duality or this difference between Stilgar, who's like super on board with the prophecy, and Chani, who is super not on board with the prophecy. I think that's a good idea because in the book it's a lot more subtle, where basically all of the Fremen are like, yeah, let's do it. The prophecy's real. Paul is the savior. And it's only like really subtle when Jessica is like, ooh, this feels kind of bad exploiting this culture. And like Paul is like, ooh, you know, Stilgar is becoming I'm losing a friend and gaining a follower. And it's like, it's a lot more subtle. Whereas I think for the purposes of a Hollywood movie, I think that it makes a lot of sense to actually make it more explicit and to have Chani say, hey, no, this is bad. I think that makes sense. But like, how did they? Yeah, but how do they resolve it? Like, is there going to be a scene where Chani's like, well, it sucks that you're exploiting my culture and lying to my people, and I think that you're full of shit, but you're Timothée Chalamet, so it's fine. I will choose you instead of my entire culture. Like, how is that not enormously dark and cynical, you know?
It is. And I think that Chani is going to have to ask herself that question. Like, what's the solution to this?
Yeah.
How could this not happen? The only way is Paul's death. So do you choose your love or do you choose the Fremen?
Yeah.
That's her test. That's her struggle. That's her arc. And I think if they're really going to do that the way we think they're going to do it, I mean, that's brilliant. And I'm looking forward to see how it plays out because it's very complex and it's not an arc that you typically see. It's very I don't know, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I think that it is a good and interesting question to ask. Like it feels like this isn't something that they're like shoehorning in. Like this is a real concern in the book that they are giving more attention because it deserves more attention. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about this plotline.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
Sorry. Well, I think that it's important to emphasize the lie of it all, the lie of the prophecy and what the Bene Gesserit are doing, because I think that is something that's more or less missing from like. I think general people's understanding of Dune. Like a lot of people have seen the David Lynch movie, and that's what they know about Dune. They don't realize that the prophecy is a lie. They don't realize that the Fremen are being abused, and manipulate it, right? So I feel like if as Denis Villeneuve, as the person that's bringing Dune to this generation of people, I think it's important for him to emphasize that, and I think he knows that because I think he understands its importance to the overall narrative, and it's something like I said was totally missing from the David Lynch version of Dune. Like David Lynch did not do that aspect at all. Paul is 100% the Messiah, and he makes it rain at the end. So
Yeah.
it's a key difference, and it needs to be emphasized.
Yeah. Yeah. Ferdinand in the live chat asks, "Can you explain more how Paul is exploiting the Fremen?" Um, and I think it is important to clarify. I mean, I think the short version of it is that the Bene Gesserit have an entire organization called the Missionaria Protectiva and the Panoplica Propheticus, and like they have this whole scheme where for thousands of years they deliberately plant religious ideas in cultures all across the universe. And it's stuff like, there will be this reverend mother who has special powers and special knowledge, and she will she will make all these cool things happen for you. She'll have a son, and you can trust these people, and these people have your best interests at heart. And that's the lie of it. It's not true that the Bene Gesserit care about all these random cultures all around the universe. The reality is that the Bene Gesserit plant these ideas as a way to influence cultures around the galaxy, so that when they go somewhere, they can assume that, oh yeah, there are religious ideas planted here that I can exploit. If I pretend to fit the signs, if I say the right words, I can make these people do what I want. It's a plan of manipulation. And so, like, the lie is that the Fremen and the Lisan al-Gaib prophecy, the prophecy suggests that Paul and Jessica are here to save the Fremen and help the Fremen. But that's not true. The reality is that Paul and Jessica are there to advance the political goals of House Atreides, to recapture Arrakis for their own purposes. And so Paul's conquest of Arrakis does not ultimately help the Fremen. Is that a good summary,
Yeah.
Quinn?
I think you explained it succinctly. I think that was a great summary of the Bene Gesserit exploitation. Yeah, basically, it's basically everything you said. The Bene Gesserit seeded myths that formed into legends and religions on many different planets, not just Arrakis. And it's basically just in case they ever need these people. And the Bene Gesserit have also been doing this whole thing where they've been tinkering with bloodlines to create this person called the Kwisatz Haderach. That's who Paul may or may not be, potentially. And the Kwisatz Haderach would help the Bene Gesserit would help the Bene Gesserit lead the universe, the human universe, down the path that they best saw fit in their theory, in their design. And also, the Missionaria Protectiva is meant to kind of prepare the world for his coming. They seeded all these things so that when they decide to reveal the Kwisatz Haderach, the people are ready and the people are already open to it because the Bene Gesserit have already seeded the myths and legends.
Yeah. And another angle to it is the ecological transformation of Arrakis, because there's the whole idea seeded by Kynes about how the Fremen want to change the desert planet Arrakis into a green paradise, and so the Fremen sort of expect that the Lisan al-Gaib will help them make Arrakis into a paradise. But what the later books explore, like when Paul and Jessica get there, they're like, oh yeah, fine, yeah, sure, we'll turn Arrakis into a green paradise, sure, whatever. But the later books explore the consequences of that transformation and how it is ultimately not in the Fremen's best interests to turn Arrakis into a green paradise, and that it ultimately destroys their culture because their culture is based on being a desert people. And so it destroys them to change Arrakis, and there's no more worms or spice if you destroy the deserts. So so yeah, like as you say, it's complicated because like the Kwisatz Haderach thing means that Paul kind of is a real super powerful person who can change the world, but the lie is that this is all for the Fremen, because it just ain't.
And like you said, there is a sense of cultural loss that permeates Dune Messiah and Children of Dune where the Fremen are concerned. Just there's a sense of cultural degradation, and then by the time we see the remnants of the Fremen in God Emperor of Dune, they're now museum Fremen. They're
Yeah,
now just a farce. They're just like this ridiculous imitation of something that once was great.
yeah,
And it's sad. It's sad. The Fremen die essentially.
yeah, yeah. It's such a gut punch when Duncan sees the
Hmm.
museum Fremen and it's like, wow, like this is the consequence. This is what it was all for. This is the result of all the prophecy. This just this pale imitation. And you know, like we only really get the full revelation of that in those later books. But you know, the closest thing we get to showing us that in the first Dune book is Stilgar, and that's why I'm really glad that they seem to be paying a lot of attention to Stilgar's
I
arc.
love it.
Because Stilgar is he's sort of the beginning of that. He's sort of the beginning of that downfall because Stilgar is such this powerful, charismatic, independent guy, and seeing him become this sort of starry-eyed religious zealot serving Paul is just so depressing. And so
You
I
see
really
the
hope they capture
whole
that.
you see the whole cycle in Stilgar's arc through up through Children of Dune, right? So you see how he becomes radicalized, how he becomes a true believer, and then you see slowly over time how he's disenfranchised. Like it starts with him asking questions and not understanding Paul and Dune Messiah. And then by Children of Dune, he's wondering if he should kill Paul's abomination of children. Like, you know what I mean? He completely goes from like believing fully to questioning things
Yeah.
to like realizing that he's been essentially lied to and caught in this really weird place where he's like, yeah, I serve House Atreides, but I also realize that things that I used to believe weren't necessarily accurate to reality.
Yeah, yeah, because it's not just some completely linear, straightforward character arc. He is this intelligent guy who has so many back and forths and so many doubts that he's wrestling with. And yeah, as you say, Children of Dune Book Three does such a good job of exploring that, and as Stilgar interrogates what he believes.
Yeah, it's one of the most interesting character journeys I think in the whole series. That along with I think Aaliyah and of course Paul. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting to see that because Stilgar always is kind of relegated to a side character. He's never really like a main character, but he is like I don't know. We see Paul in a different light through Stilgar's eyes. You know,
yeah.
if that makes any sense.
I think part of how it works, like, I mean, people always ask, why does Duncan Idaho get resurrected thousands of times?
Hmm.
Why is Duncan Idaho hanging around in thousands of years in the future?
Because he's
Why
just a
does
guy.
because he's just a guy. Because like the main characters of Dune, Paul and Leto and everyone and Teg, like they constantly are becoming completely different organisms, and they have these enormous philosophical, ideological shifts and plans. Like they are unrelatable characters. We need to have a constant. We need to have a relatable average-ish human person who we can see through their eyes, and so it's like the control in a scientific experiment. It's like Duncan is always the same, but how does Duncan view the dependent variable, the changing thing? Like how does Duncan view the changing situation?
That
um
that was why the God Emperor in particular like brought him back over and over and over again. He was like his grounding point to not only that place and time, but just like I don't I Duncan I feel like Duncan's reactions to the things that Leto was doing were very important to Leto. It was very
yeah,
important for him to see and understand that. And it's also just like so funny when Duncan wakes up in God Emperor days and he's just like, what the flip is going on? What is all this? This is so weird. It's interesting to see that because he's the only one that points out how weird everything is, and I you need that in that book. You need someone to just be like, okay, this is weird, but okay.
yeah, yeah. In a book about a 1,000-year-old worm tyrant playing mind games with nuns and genetic fanatics, you need an average guy to just stand there and point and say, "This is weird. What's going on?
Yeah,
I don't like this." Like you really need something, yeah, relatable. Um, so yeah, part of me is curious to, like I don't know if they will or should adapt Dune Messiah, but part of me does want to see Jason Momoa playing a cyborg philosopher.
8.
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
Hmm. I love the name Hate too in Dune Messiah because it was such so obviously a jab by the Tleilaxu. It's like they're
Yeah.
giving him Duncan, but it's like we also hate you, by the way. This is a symbol of hate. We want you to know that.
Yeah, it's like it's such like a school child. Nah, nah, nah. We'll bring
I
back your
know.
friend, but we're gonna call him Doo Doo Head. So you have to keep saying Doo Doo Head. It's like, really, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for the super chat from Adam, who says, what they could do is show the wars at first part, and as the movie continues, then telling Messiah story, or do what Sci-Fi did, put both books into one. Well, yeah, I think we talked about this, like the 2000 Sci-Fi miniseries. Maybe they could
Mhm.
combine Dune Messiah and Children of Dune into one story, one adaptation.
Yeah, like do two movies, like and have flashbacks throughout like both maybe, or like yeah, I feel like if yeah, flashbacks would be key because I don't think we could do it where it's like we like watch the entire Dune Messiah story like in order and then watch the entire Children of Dune story like in order. I think it would be better handled through like flashing back. And then that way they can maybe like add a degree of like mystery to it for people that maybe like haven't read the books and don't know what's going on. I think flashbacks are very effective in that way because it adds an element of like, oh, what's happening and it adds a degree of like when you get to the end and you see how everything fits together, it's more satisfying that way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree because I think that there's a lot of opportunities here to play with non-linearity and
Hmm.
flashbacks and flash forwards and visions because of course, the Dune book has those quotes at the start of every chapter which often are telling you what's going to happen in the book. Like before Yue betrays Leto, those quotes at the start of the chapters tell you very early on that, oh yeah, Yui's gonna betray Leto and Paul's gonna become the
Hmm.
Messiah, and like it spoils the whole thing like right at the
Yeah.
start. And so and that's because the books are about prescience and the books are about foresight and the books are about if you knew what would happen, how would that change your perspective on the world? And so it makes sense for the movies to play with that and to change with the order of things and change our perspective on things. And in a really funny meta way, I think that the trailers for this movie are like prescient visions of the future. Like I think that when
Hmm.
we see what's going to happen at the end of Dune Part 2 in the trailers, it's almost like we are Paul seeing the future. And our interpretations of these trailers, these future visions, are kind of like how prescience works. They could be meta with this if they want.
Yeah, I actually like that interpretation a lot because it's like we're seeing like flashes of things that kind of make sense, but they kind of don't, and they kind of look familiar, but they kind of don't. And we're trying to like put it together and determine like what's actually going on.
Yeah,
So
we
yeah.
we are Paul trying to interpret these visions, and there's even differences. Like, it's tiny, but like in the second trailer, this shot of Jessica, they use this shot looking at the side of Jessica's face, but in
Hmm.
the first trailer, they used a slightly different shot for this line of Jessica, with Jessica facing the camera. And so, I mean, obviously that's just minor. They're still editing the movie or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the visions because we are seeing alternate possible futures. We are seeing alternate possible versions of this movie, just like Paul sees
And
alternate futures.
and that even goes back to like the first trailers ever released because there's so many shots and lines that like are not actually in the movie. So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
even the
Like Paul
CGI is still being done.
screaming. Yeah, yeah. Like there, I think in the first trailer we ever saw, or like one of the first ones, we see like Paul screaming when he puts his hand in the box, which never happens. We also hear like there's several lines from the Reverend Mother that never happen. Guys, Helen Wilhelm that never happen.
Yeah,
I just need that extended version of Dune, Denny.
yeah. Give
Come
us
on.
give us the 5 hour IMAX Director's Ultra 7 disc Blu-ray box. Come on, Denny, we want it.
Yeah, I feel like that I have like copies of the Dune on Blu-ray, Dune on Blu-ray, but like there's not many special features. Where are the deleted scenes? That's what I need.
Yeah, yeah. We always want more, but it may be that Denny is maybe he cut the deleted scenes for a reason. Like
Yeah.
I tend to
Eh,
think that he knows what he's doing.
from what I've heard, Denis Villeneuve is pretty like strong on like no director's cuts. Like the movie that I put out is the movie that's out, basically.
Yeah. But I mean, also directors have like very particular, persnickety ideas about what film is and how their films should be viewed. And that's not
True.
necessarily the same way that we view things. Like, I really wish they released the IMAX aspect ratio version of the movie on
That would be
Blu-ray
nice.
because like there's a whole half of the movie that you don't get to see if you don't watch it in IMAX, and some people can't watch it in IMAX. So, you know.
Yeah. For I feel like some people don't even realize. Yeah, like so if you compare like the IMAX version of like the movie to like the regular widescreen version, it's like there's a whole like several like inches or something at the top that you don't see, top and bottom that you don't see.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there is stuff happening out of frame that you don't get to see
hmm
on the Blu-ray. So it's like, why not let people buy that and see that? It's weird.
hmm need more
Thanks.
Dune.
Need more Dune. Thanks for the super chat from Robert Daniel Picard and from Brendan, who says if water is Earth's oil, like water on Arrakis is equivalent to oil on Earth. Frank Herbert said that. What Earthling drug most closely resembles spice?
Mushrooms or something like ayahuasca.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's the direct link to mushrooms is pretty clear. I'm pretty sure like a friend of Frank Herbert said pretty conclusively that like Frank Herbert based the spice trips off of mushrooms, which is very
Yeah,
believable.
it's super believable. I am kind of like I can pull up the actual quotes from that because there is that guy who's like a big fan of mushrooms who published this thing saying that like here are all the ways that psilocybin mushrooms inspired Frank Herbert. Like he said that it's a particular species that Frank Herbert was growing and that it turns blue.
Wasn't it Golden Teacher? No, maybe not.
I don't remember. But he also like he made a bunch of really specific claims. Like he said that the maggots that grow around these mushrooms are what inspired the Dune sandworms. And he said that like the Bene Gesserit were
Interesting.
inspired by like specific kinds of mushroom psychedelic cults in Mexico or something. Like this guy made really specific claims about how
Hmm.
these specific mushrooms inspired Dune, and I don't know how true that is. Like maybe it's true when Frank told this to this
hmm
mushroom guy, or maybe this guy's exaggerating. I don't know, but yeah, like whatever the degree of it, there's obvious parallels for sure.
Yeah. hmm
Um, Rue Digitized says, "How are you guys these days? How are you, Quinn?"
I'm doing good. I just started my new podcast, Cosmic Chronicles podcast. You can check that out if you want. I think the link is in the description.
Yeah,
Been making
link.
lots of videos too.
Yeah, everyone go subscribe. Obviously, subscribe to Quinn's Ideas YouTube channel if you haven't already, and also subscribe to Quinn's new podcast. I listened to the episode about aliens. Um,
Oh, really? That was a
spec.
fun one.
Yeah, it's a fun topic.
hmm
So yeah, everyone go subscribe. Thank you, Stank Herbert. Thank you, the fancy filmmaker who says, "Have you two played the classic Dune board game?"
Yes, I actually have. I played it with a group of friends not too long ago. It's a lot of fun. It's a little daunting at first just looking at it, but I promise you, if you've got like three or four friends, and you guys like board games, totally get it because like once you get to playing, it's easy and it's fun and there's a lot of strategy involved. If you've ever played something like Risk, it's kind of similar a little bit. So yeah, I recommend it.
I like. Is that the one where they have the sort of slices of Arrakis and and the storms
Yes.
come and sweep across
Yeah.
Arrakis and wipe out your dudes? And yeah, like
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of cool that they've translated the feel of Dune into some really cool gameplay mechanics
It's
in that
really
board game.
cool.
Yeah.
hmm
Thanks for the super chat from Anonymous, who says, "Thanks for this wonderful channel. Love Westworld Bananald." Oh man, part of me wants to go back and do a Westworld season 4 video because for some godforsaken reason I did deep dive video series into 3 seasons of Westworld before it got cancelled and fell apart
I
at the end.
canceled it.
Um,
Yeah, I only ever saw the first season of Westworld, believe it or not. I
yeah,
felt like I'd seen enough. not hating on it or anything like that, guys. I feel like I don't know. Does it in your opinion, do like the continuing seasons continue to expand the story in interesting ways?
I think you stopped at the right time. I really wanted Westworld's later seasons to be great. Like its ambitions were so interesting, and it was trying to be
Hmm.
something so great, and I was really hopeful that it would achieve what it was trying to achieve. I think that in many ways it failed. Like there's still some things that I like about Westworld season 2 and a little bit of Westworld season 3, but ultimately I don't think it worked in the later seasons. So that's disappointing. So yeah, I think you stopped at exactly the right point.
Cool. It's good to know. Because I definitely I enjoyed the first season for what it was. I think that because I've read so many sci-fi books that deal with similar concepts, I don't think the first season or just Westworld grabbed me like it grabbed other people, but it was fine. It
Yeah,
was fine.
there was this stuff about like the creators were saying that at this point we are writing this show for Reddit. They were like, "Oh, we love it when those people on Reddit are trying to pick apart the theories and make sense of our timeline." And it's like, okay, like fine, like it's cool that the super nerds on Reddit and Alt Shift X are having fun picking things apart. But do you really think the average viewer wants to have to look at a secret website to find clues to figure out what order these scenes are happening in? It's like,
That's a bit much. It's very David Lindelof though. David Lindelof loves to do like the viral marketing. David Lindelof is the guy that did Lost and Watchmen. He loves to do
yeah,
like the viral marketing, like interactive type of stuff.
yeah. I think it's fine to do that, but like, don't forget to also tell a story that is appealing to average people as well. You need to do both. You
Mhm.
can't just do one or the other.
Yeah.
Have you seen The
And not everybody's
Leftovers?
got time for that. Have I seen The Leftovers? Is that the HBO series?
It's
I
like a
haven't.
Lindelof thing about the Rapture. I keep having people tell me to watch it, and I would really like to
Ah,
watch it.
I
Hmm.
haven't seen it.
Thanks for the super chat from Jordan, who says here to support the stream. Do you think that any movie or TV series will be able to finish the whole Dune saga? What do you reckon?
Do you, do you think that any movie? Oh, okay. I see what you mean. I mean, I don't know. The thing with these big Hollywood movies, especially, is they really, really need that capital return for the movies to continue.
Yeah,
And basically, if Dune Part 2 doesn't make like as much or more than the first movie, we're probably not getting a third big budget movie. So
yeah,
it just depends on how much it makes. But I feel like a TV show has a much greater chance of succeeding, but even then it's not guaranteed because like so many shows get canceled in the first season. So many shows that I really like 1899 I thought was really good, canceled in the first season. Like the
yeah.
OA I thought was really good, canceled in the second season. So I mean,
Oh, the
there's no way to
OA.
tell.
I loved
Yeah,
the OA season one. I
great
was
show.
so sad that it got cancelled.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Super sad.
I agree that like I think a TV series makes more sense for the later Dune books. Like, there's just no way there's going to be a big budget Hollywood movie about God Emperor of Dune.
No
Like,
way.
it's
But
a
I could
book.
see it as a three-part miniseries. I could see
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, and you could honestly do a lot of the later books lower budget. Like, you'd have to skimp on some of the battle scenes, but like there aren't many battle scenes in the later books.
Hmm.
So I think you could make a more sort of low budget later books adaptations similar to the
Well,
2000 sci-fi series.
I was thinking, I don't see why they didn't just, if they were going to do the Sisterhood of Dune show, I think they were trying to do some loose adaptation of the Brian Herbert Sisterhood of Dune book. But in my opinion, I thought they could just literally skip to Heretics and Chapter House because I feel
Yeah,
like there's enough time in between that and the first book where even if you're watching that show, it's not going to spoil you for the first movie, I don't think, because it's about something fundamentally different, and that's just like the deep history. That's like the deep lore. So
yeah,
I could have seen them doing that as a TV show, and I thought that would have been really cool. And they could reference things like the Tyrant, and that just like gives a little bit of like mystery, like God Emperor or whatever. So yeah, I could have seen that, but
yeah.
I don't know what's going on with the show now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because like as we were saying, like playing with non-linearity makes sense. Like having a different TV show that's set 4,000 years after the first Dune movie coming out at the same time is kind of like wonderfully in keeping with the
Yeah.
themes of prescience in Dune.
Hmm.
And I agree that like they're trying to make this show about the Bene Gesserit, which like I think is a good idea. There is so much to explore with the Bene Gesserit, and that's why Frank Herbert wrote 2 books about them. So it's like,
Hmm.
what I don't understand is like, why would you try to come up with your own Bene Gesserit story, or why would you adapt the Brian Herbert prequels
Well,
and
see,
stuff that a lot of people don't like? Why not? Like Frank has done the hard work for you already.
he's done it.
Adapt, adapt Heretics and Chapter House.
All the best scenes with Bene Gesserit are in Heretics and Chapter House. Like literally, you see how they function. You see like how the entire organization functions. There's so much information about how the Bene Gesserit work in those 2 books. And I've read Sisterhood of Dune by Brian Herbert, and it's about the very, 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 very early Bene Gesserit. So they are not the masters of the universe that we know and love. They are not. They don't have the same powers really.
Yeah,
The lore is off in other ways as well, and it's just not the Bene Gesserit. Like I like when they announced that it was going to be the Brian book, I'm just like, okay, it's not like the worst book I've ever read, but they're also not the Bene Gesserit everyone knows and loves. So it's just like, why are we even doing this?
yeah. It's very weird. it's a little bit like in the Game of Thrones spin-offs. It's a bit like if you made the Nymeria's Voyage TV show or the Voyages of Corlys Velaryon TV show before you made House of the Dragon. It's like, okay, like
Yeah.
fine. Like I don't think it's a terrible idea to make like an original story about Nymeria or Corlys or Valyria or the Golden Empire or whatever. Fine. But like, why not adapt the material that we already have first?
Hmm.
Because it's great and that's what
Exactly.
people love and it's connected and it's like, why? Yeah, it's so weird.
And especially because with the Brian Herbert book, it's called Sisterhood of Dune, but really it's also about the beginning of the Guild and its other organizations. So actually, the Sisterhood is only a small part. It's actually a part of a trilogy. Um, so because they're choosing this, they have to really like take all these liberties and like really expand it. So like you said, they have to invent all this extra stuff, which like you already have in 2 big books. So
Yeah.
it's weird.
It sounds like some of
It's a
that
little bizarre.
like weird old Star Wars extended universe stuff where they're like, here's the ancient origins of the Jedi when there were these dudes on this planet before lightsabers and before they understood the Force, and the Sith were
But who
these.
asked though?
Yeah, like, do we need this? Like, do we need this to be a TV show? Is this what we need to spend millions of dollars on? Eh.
Yeah. Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, I'm pretty sure Villeneuve pulled out of it from the
Yeah.
last I heard, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he pulled out of it and he's not attached to it anymore. So, like, I don't know. It's really up in the air. I wish them the best.
Yeah. From what I understand, there's a lot of the traditional bad signs in terms of like the showrunner exited, and some talk about creative, irreconcilable creative differences, and there's a lot of bad signs about that Bene Gesserit TV show. But yeah, like you, I hope that it's great, and I'll check it out, and let's see what happens. Thanks for the super chat from the Lady Eternal, who says, "Hi guys, I see so much disrespect for the sci-fi adaptations of Dune out there. What are your favorite parts of those versions? Who in those versions gave your favorite performances?"
Okay, what's her name? Okay, I actually like the sci-fi versions. I think they're they're faithful to the book for the most part. I actually really enjoy Susan Sarandon as Winsashia and the Children of Dune one. I think she does a really cool job. Um, I'm not crazy about the guy that plays Paul. Um, let's see. I
Yeah.
think the Baron is okay. The Baron is okay. I feel like he's closer to the actual Baron than what we see in the David Lynch Dune. As far as favorite parts, oh, I'm totally blanking on what's his name? What's his name? The guy from X-Men. What's his name? The guy that plays Leto the second. I'm totally forgetting his
Yeah,
name.
the famous
He's
guy, I
great.
forget. Yeah, he's
He's
pretty good.
great as Leto the second. But he's a little old. He's a little old. But yeah.
I enjoy all the people making fun of the 2000 series for all of the hats.
The
There are
costumes,
some
the costumes are terrible.
spectacularly enormous hats. Like, I mean, check out this hat on Gaius Mahim. Like every
Wait,
second character has hats like
it's
this.
ridiculous. And also, the guild hats are so ridiculous. And there's some really weird line deliveries in the miniseries as well.
Yeah.
Right? With there's that one famous clip that went viral a while ago with the guild navigator, like, the guild does not take your orders. And it's literally that dramatic. It's like, what, guy? Uh,
I kind of enjoy that specifically with the guild guys because the guild are space weirdos who no one likes. Like they are like these barely human, yeah, like these hats. And I think this moment with the Space and Guild is
oh yeah.
hilarious, and they're so weird, and
They
it's
look
like
ridiculous.
I kind of dig it. Um, but I don't know. I feel like I don't know if it's like the pacing or the writing, but I find the 2000 series hard to watch. Like I find it not super compelling. Like on paper, like yes, it is a more faithful adaptation of the book than the Lynch movie. It includes more of the book stuff than the Villeneuve movies include. Like on paper, it's good, but I don't. It doesn't grab me as much. I'm not sure why.
I totally get it. I feel like it comes from like an era that's like very nostalgic for me because I watched a lot of Sci-Fi Channel growing up, and it just looks and sounds like things that I saw when I was a kid. So when I first saw it, I think it was very comforting for me, even though I did see it as an adult. It was very nostalgic to watch, even though I had never seen it before. So I'm coming at it from that angle too. Um, and then also too because the time of this miniseries, it's like it heralded like a shift, a change in the way sci-fi was doing things. They went from like doing like adaptations of things and more like sci-fi things to doing like more silly things. This is what and doing more reality show type things. So this is like the end of that era.
Yeah.
So it's interesting,
I also
even though
find
it's definitely flawed.
I also find the bad CGI to be quite charming. Like you can sort of tell that this kind of CGI technology was kind of new and exciting, and it's like, oh, we can make
Yeah,
CGI cities and planets, and wow, isn't this amazing? And it's like,
yeah,
it looks quite bad in retrospect, but I'm still very fond of it because they were
it
obviously
looks
having fun
horrible.
with it. Yeah,
It's definitely not pretty. It's definitely ugly. Definitely
yeah,
ugly.
but it's like earnest, you know.
Hmm.
I like how they did the Fremen Siege and the Glow Globes and stuff. Like they had a limited budget and they did a pretty good effort, you know. I think so. Yeah, there's things that I like about it. And interestingly, part of it is that they have this Irulan plotline in the 2000 series where Irulan
They
is
do.
investigating Paul Atreides and she's hanging out with Fade and um, she's a much more active character than she is in the book, and it seems
Hmm.
like they're doing something very similar in the
And Villeneuve's.
Villeneuve movie. It seems like they're drawing inspiration, which is interesting.
Yeah. See, the thing about the Dune miniseries too is that it's a miniseries and it's very like it's long. How long is the first one? I think the first one is like 5 hours at least, and then the second one is also like another 5 hours.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like a lot to get through. It's a lot to get through. It's very spaced out. There's some additional scenes and added moments. So it's very the pacing isn't great. I will say that the pacing is definitely not great.
Yeah, yeah. It does not feel like a show that has edited down to its most essential parts. It feels
But
like
then
it's luxuriating in its runtime.
at the same time, I'm also like really happy that this came out at a time where it could get made because
Yeah,
this might well be the only adaptation of Dune and Children of Dune that we ever get.
yeah,
So for even all of its flaws, it's cool. And also, I think if you just look at it like, okay, this is a play that I'm watching, and you
yeah,
don't think about it like this is a mini series that's been filmed, then I feel like it works a little bit better because it's like the way it looks like a play. It looks like something. Looks like they're on a stage. I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like it's like healthy to alter our expectations and go, like not everything has to be photorealistic. And not
Hmm.
everything has to be like beautifully framed and cinematic like the Villeneuve stuff is. Like sometimes we can just watch a story being played out by some actors, and that can be great and fun, you know. Like and also like low budget. Like we need more low budget stuff. Like we need not everything needs to be a Disney mega $1 million thing. Like
Yeah.
when we change our expectations, we can see more new kinds of stories. So, yeah, I agree. I'm glad that the 2000 adaptation exists.
Yeah. Oh, well, since we mentioned the podcast, my new podcast, Cosmic Chronicles, go subscribe to it.
Link in
We
the
our new
description.
episode, link in the description. Our new episode is about some of our like favorite independent small sci-fi movies.
Yeah,
And these are the type of movies that get overlooked, but usually they're better than like, I don't know, like a $200 million like Tom Cruise movie or something like that. So
yeah,
I am all for simple, low budget sci-fi flicks. I'm a big fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
yeah,
Um, and some of those episodes, it's just them on that ship talking in a room, and that's
yeah.
the entire episode, and it's some of the best television you will ever watch. So I love low budget stuff, and I'm down for it, and I wish there was more of it.
Yeah, I think George Martin uh, talked a lot about I Claudius, which is this old 70s show about Roman history and the Roman
Hmm.
emperors, and that was something that he compared to House of the Dragon. And he talked about how I Claudius was super old budget, low budget, and it all happened in like one tiny room and one set. And there are these Roman columns behind the actors, and sometimes the Roman columns flap in the breeze when they walk past them because they're just these like sheets with like columns painted on them. And so it's super low budget, but like, yeah, you look at it more as theater and you can still appreciate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I'm conscious that Alt Shift X, there are all these Alt Shift X videos about these, high budget HBO TV shows and stuff, which is like cool and fine. But like, I think I'm also really happy to do stuff like All Tomorrows, which is about a obscure Turkish science fiction story by the wonderful and inimitable C.M. Kozeman, who everyone should also subscribe to on YouTube. Um, I think that, as people with YouTube channels, it's good for us to have a look at a wide variety and diversity of stories, not just whatever's coming out of Hollywood.
I definitely agree. And that's kind of been my mission for a little bit, kind of. But yeah, I actually, since you brought up All Tomorrows, I haven't read that, but I've had like so many people ask me to cover it since you did that video. And I'm just like, no, Alt Chip Dex did a great video on it. Watch his. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah,
It's interesting.
I think it's like I also got requests for like make more All Tomorrows stuff, but it's like it's been cool to see like other people take that up and make other All Tomorrows stuff, and people check out more of CM Kozeman's work. Like to use it as like a starting point to look at more other stuff and create more other stuff, and yeah, no, I'm all for that. No, yeah, we don't need like 10 more All Tomorrows sequels. Like CM Kozeman could have done, well, here's All Tomorrows 2 and 3 and 4. But he is someone who wants to explore new stuff and not just repeat the
Yeah.
same thing. So that's the other thing. Like we don't need like constant sequels all the time, Like
Yeah.
when you get excited about a story, your instinct shouldn't be how do I make 10 more of the same thing? The instinct should
How
be
many?
how do I iterate on this and how do I
Yeah,
alter this? And that's what Frank Herbert's about, right? Every Dune book is radically different to the first one. Every Dune book
totally
takes a
different.
radically different perspective, and that's Frank's entire point. Don't just do the same thing over and over. Keep reinventing yourself.
Yeah, I really agree with you on the sequel point. Like, how many times do you encounter like a series where the first thing is good, and then there's just like five just like god awful sequels? It happens so often because something is popular, and then they like want to just repeat the same thing over and over again, and everything else is just like a pale shadow of what came before.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat from Monberry and from Bert and from Monberry, who says, "You were the first person with a soothing voice to sleep and yet still be conscious enough to listen to. It's hard to explain, sorry. Some might understand. Alt Shift X." I'm glad you enjoy Mon Perry. Thank you, Mitch Evans. Thank you, Eric, who says, if Paul turns away, are we left to assume humanity would become extinct? Was there no other path or way? Would the big Kwisatz Haderach QH lead to destruction? QH. What does QH mean? Maybe.
I think they meant to say Kwisatz Haderach, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know. With the Bene Gesserit, I don't know.
Yeah. So if Paul just noped out, do you think that humanity would have gone extinct?
At what point are we talking? At what point noped out? We're talking like in Dune, the first book.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if Paul had died in the first book, the Bene Gesserit would have just tried again to make another Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean, there is like at the end of Dune, or like at several points in Dune, Paul is like, if I die now, the jihad will happen anyway, with or
yeah.
without me. Um,
Oh yeah. Once he goes past a certain point, it's immovable. Then he would just be the figurehead. He would be like a martyr, literally.
yeah, I agree. And like, if the Atreides never went to Arrakis or anything, like I agree. Like the Bene Gesserit would just keep on plotting, and they would eventually probably produce a Kwisatz Haderach. So that's the funny thing. Like, despite all Paul's efforts, he kind of changes nothing. I mean, I guess he makes the Fremen uprising and the Jihad and stuff happen, but I mean, if you look at God Emperor and Leto the Second, it's like his concerns about the
Yeah.
extinction of humanity, that would have been an issue regardless of whether Muad'Dib's
Yeah.
empire happened or not.
Yeah. Like okay, so Paul doesn't see the thing with the great enemy until like at some point after Dune Messiah, because he there's a scene where he's thinking like, oh, the concerns I had before, like what I'm seeing now is way worse.
Yeah,
So that's related to the great enemy somehow and all that jazz with the potential like Ixian machines and the phase dancers and all that stuff.
yeah. When stuff gets real confusing in the later books.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mac Brown, for the super chat, who says favorite Dune character.
Favorite Dune character. Oh, this is kind of. I guess I have to say Leto the Second. I just
Yeah,
think he's so intriguing and weird and cool and just bizarre and just like everything about that character is so interesting. And I could read another book of his ramblings, honestly.
I love how much of book four is just that. It's just Leto
Rambling.
complaining about his feelings and about politics. And one of the really like fun realizations I had about Dune is that Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, reportedly had a lot of trouble with the IRS, who were hounding him to pay his taxes for a lot of the last years of his life, which really gives new context to some of Leto's rants about the government and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Dune is about like, I really hate having to comply with governments, and governments are always crap, and we
Yeah.
why should we have to follow these rules? And then you read on Wikipedia that Frank Herbert was not paying his taxes for the Dune books. That's like, oh yeah, and like there's all this interesting, like Frank Herbert was a speechwriter for Republican politicians in
Yeah.
America for a while, and whatever you assume about the politics of Dune, it's more complicated than that. Is what I'll
hmm
say. Yeah.
I will say that I think that Frank Herbert takes a part of that disdain from bureaucracy from Asimov with Foundation, because Foundation. I mean, Asimov frames bureaucracy as one of the reasons that the empire fell. Like the main reason,
Yeah.
actually, it was like the fact that like the bureaucracy on Trantor couldn't really handle the needs of like the entire universe, so it just kind of collapsed upon itself. So I
Yeah.
always thought maybe he took a little bit of that element from that, but I didn't know the taxes thing. So maybe that definitely probably contributes to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how true some of those allegations are, but it kind of makes a lot of sense. Like you know, like it's really fun to get into the sci-fi world building imagination of it all, but like Dune is also very obviously just like this smart old American guy complaining about the government, like
Yeah,
old man shouts at cloud. Like that is a lot of the energy of especially the later books to me.
yeah.
In terms of like favorite Dune characters, I mean, someone who I'd love to talk about is Count Hasimir Fenring,
Hmm.
and I'm
The failed Kwisatz Haderach.
the failed Kwisatz Haderach. Do you want to explain who he is?
So the Bene Gesserit have been trying to make the Kwisatz Haderach for a very long time, and they've tested people before, and usually they die. And Finring was one that didn't quite come out right. He was almost a Kwisatz Haderach, but no, that's the deal with Finring.
Yeah, and he's invisible to Paul's prescience, his visions
Prescience.
of the
Yeah.
future, and so it's this wonderful moment in the final chapter of Dune when Paul sees Hasimir Fenring. I mean, like, he sees Fade, and he's like, oh, yeah, I had visions of Fade. That's fine. He sees the Emperor, and he's like, yeah, I know what's going on with the Emperor. I know what's going on with the Spacing Guild. That's all fine.
Hmm.
But then he locks eyes with Count Hasimir Fenring, and he's like, who is this
I
guy?
haven't seen you. I
Oh,
haven't
my
seen this
God.
guy.
And then he
And
realizes
that's
that,
a
like,
concept.
yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say that's a concept that we continue to explore in Dune Messiah. The fact that people can be hidden from prescience. So,
Yeah, I think it's meant to be this like Frank talks about Heisenberg uncertainty or whatever, and it's
hmm
like you know when you observe you alter reality, and it's this idea
reality.
of you know if you can see the future but they can see the future, if you alter something you alter what they can alter, and it's this weird sort of mindfuck that means that people who can see the future uh, disrupt each other's ability to see the future.
Which
Um,
makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I'm smart enough to fully get the physics of it, but I think that
It's a
yeah,
little esoteric,
it definitely
or a
makes
lot
like
esoteric.
it makes intuitive sense that like if you could see the future and someone else could see the future, you could alter it in a way that disrupts their vision, and so yeah, that's a huge plot point later on. But Fenring, like I another sort of meta irony of Fenring is that the guy who Paul can't see in his visions of the future, Hasimir, does not appear in the Dune trailers so far. The guy who Paul
Oh,
couldn't foresee, we can't foresee in the
and we see
trailers.
Margot,
We
but
see
we don't see
Margot,
him.
we don't see Hasimir.
That was a good point. I didn't even think about it that way, but that goes back to your like idea or your concept of the trailers acting like a form of prescience. That's so meta if that's actually what they're going for.
Right? I don't know if it's deliberate, but it kind of perfectly fits. There is some question, though, as to whether Hasimir will be in the movie at all. Like, there's
Yeah.
been reports that Tim Blake Nelson will be in Dune, and some people have speculated that he may play Hasimir, and I think that may make sense. Tim Blake Nelson said on a podcast that his role in Dune Part 2 is a, quote, cameo, so it's not a
Hmm.
large role, um, which fits it with the book. Like Hasimir literally only appears in one scene in the book,
Yeah.
so they could still be. Well, no, sorry, he also appears with Margot on Gaiety Prime,
With
doesn't he?
Margot.
So
Yeah. The
you
fight
know,
scene.
are they going to faithfully do Hasimir? I don't know. I hope they do.
But I could also see this being one of the things that they might cut
Yeah,
because it is kind of just like oh, and this, it's kind of yeah, I don't know. It's not as crucial to that first book as some
yeah,
other things. Hmm.
yeah. It's like if you're choosing what to include and what not to include in a Dune adaptation, Hasimir is a very obvious. Well, he's not completely essential. Like I love
Yeah.
it. I love it because it expands our perspective. Like I think part of the point of Hasimir is like Paul thinks he knows everything, and Hasimir
Mhm.
proves that he does not. Like there exists more in heaven and earth. Like there are forces beyond your understanding, and I think that also connects to the idea of who's the best fighter in the world, because
Hmm.
We like Paul's teachers, Gurney and Duncan, are meant to be like literally some of the best fighters in the world, and Paul seems to be one of the best in the world, and so it's like they are the best there is. But then they see Hasimir, and it says several times that Hasimir is a better fighter than Paul and could kill Paul. He just chooses not to. And so it's this sort of humbling moment where Paul thinks that he and his friends are the best, smartest, most powerful, toughest dudes in the universe. But Hasimir's like, no, you are not. There are other forces that you don't understand. There are other people with other emotional, internal worlds that you do not fully comprehend. And so I think it's this humbling moment that's really
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's kind of like we witness Paul become like all powerful, and then it's like actually no.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Which is the rug pull that Frank does a million times. You think you're the all
Hmm.
powerful hero? No, no. It's more
But
complicated than that.
I could almost see that being almost confusing in the movie if not done correctly. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah, so I could understand why they would choose to keep Finring out, and I'm not like super pissed off if he's not in the movie. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's another one of those things that is subversive about the book that they might not want to include in a Hollywood movie. I think it would be cool if they did, but yeah, maybe they won't. Um, so we're hoping that Hasimir will be in the movie. We think that Alia will be in the movie. What about Thufir? What are they gonna do with Thufir in Dune Part Two?
Ooh, Fear Howard. I could see. I feel like it'll be a small role. I wonder if they're gonna include the whole plot line with the poisoning. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've got to see the Baron doing some evil things to a character. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? So I feel like I think they'll keep his role relatively similar. It's not like that significant in the book anyway. He's just like kind of like hanging out with the Baron. So
you don't think they're gonna have Thufir milk a cat to get his antidote like they did in the Lynch
let's
movie?
not forget the milk the cat. No, I don't think so. I don't understand the cat milking thing. That's David Lynch being weird for the sake of being weird. He loves that. He loves it.
The
Yeah, so
cats and the
minus the
dogs.
cat milk. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the Thufir plotline in the second half of Dune is very weird and confusing. Like it's such an
It is weird.
elaborate storyline where it's like Thufir plotted with Fade to have an undrugged slave in the gladiator for Fade to fight for the purpose of discrediting Vladimir's slave master so that Fade can replace the slave master with a different slave master, which ultimately doesn't work because when Fade tries to assassinate Vladimir, Vladimir has the new slave master killed. So that sort of goes nowhere. But then Thufir warned Vladimir about Fade's assassination attempt on Vladimir. So Thufir is working for both Vladimir and Fade against each other. And Thufir has the poison and he dies at the end. So like he like it seems like Thufir is plotting against the Harkonnens, but he doesn't manage to actually accomplish anything against the Harkonnens, and he dies. And it's like
It's a little convoluted.
it's very convoluted and confusing and goes nowhere. So it's like what exactly does it need to be in the movie? I don't know.
I don't know. I feel for some reason I feel like they're gonna keep the poisoning aspect of it because that's kind of cool, like the poison and the antidote or whatever. But I don't know. I don't see them just like killing him off. So I feel like they've got to give him something to do, right? I don't know if they're gonna keep. I don't think they're gonna do it. I don't know. I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like it could go. I don't know if it necessarily makes that much sense for a movie's subplot to
Yeah.
have it be so convoluted and complex when in a movie that's already complex and when we need to be spending time like explaining other things that matter more to the narrative. So I could see them cutting or altering a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, like Hasimir, I think Thufir's plot is a logical thing to not include fully in the movie. But like, I'm trying to imagine what they will do because, like, Thufir is a character in this movie. Something's got to happen to him. So presumably it'll be being poisoned, like in the book. But like, if the only thing that would be weirder than actually including the weird book plotline would be not including all the plots and just having Thufir turn up in the final scene and say, "Hey, Paul, haven't
He's like,
seen
oh,
you for a
hi.
while. Oh no, I've been poisoned and now I'm dead." Like, can you imagine how bizarre that would be
It'd
if he
be
just
very
turns up and
strange and no one
dies
understood.
without the context? Like, that's even weirder, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I maybe he dies before, but I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna miss out on the chance of giving him that reconnection with Paul. So it's just I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna do it. Because if he doesn't die before that, then he's gonna be in the ending scene and maybe be poisoned and die. But then if he dies before that, then like he doesn't get like the final moment and the resolution with Paul Atreides. So it's just like I don't know. Something needs to be changed or altered.
Yeah, I agree. It's really puzzling. And you know, of course, that's one of the things about the book ending that is just sort of weird and hilarious and awkward. That there's just this succession, like Paul basically holds a meeting in the final chapter, and he's like,
Everyone gets
"Okay,
together.
everyone, form an orderly queue, and I will decide the fates of everybody at the end because I'm the emperor now." And so he says, "Well, Emperor, I'm exiling you, and Irulan, I'm marrying you, and Fade, I'm killing you, and Thufir, you're dead. That's sad." Like he just sort of, it's like this ridiculous conveyor belt of character resolutions that we get, and yeah, I think it would feel even more weird and awkward. And Hasimir, it would feel even more weird and awkward if they did that faithfully.
Yeah, and the way it happens in the book is pretty sudden too. It's like it cuts to the next scene and like everyone's here. Hi guys.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and with regard to that whole, you know, the Giedi Prime, Thufir, Hasimir, Margot plotline, I'm really curious to see what they do with Margot Fenring. How do you feel about Margot?
I don't know. I feel like she's our gateway into like the Bene Gesserit and the way they're operating. I think we'll see Bene Gesserit motives through Margot Finring. I think that's what they're going for here because the Bene Gesserit are very like I feel like she's our only opportunity to see the Bene Gesserit and the way they operate in this movie. You know what I mean? Because we're not going to be
Yeah.
seeing much of Gaius Helen Ohio. We're not going to be seeing the Bene Gesserit chapter house or anything like that. So we need to see a Bene Gesserit that's not Jessica and the way she operates. So I think that's the purpose, more or less, of Margot in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree because like Jessica is not a great window onto the Bene Gesserit because she's a rogue Bene Gesserit and she's going totally off their plans. Whereas Margot seems to be someone who is loyal to the like Orthodox Bene Gesserit and their plans. So I wonder if they might be able to sneak in a little bit of explanation about like what the Bene Gesserit breeding plan is and what the Kwisatz Haderach is, because like a lot of casual viewers of the movies would not know what is going on with that. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
she is our window into that.
she's very pretty.
She looks like a Bene Gesserit, I think.
Yeah,
Leia
she's a
Sado.
very interesting look.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. Um, there's something that took me a while to understand about the Margot Fade thing is that like, you know, in the book she goes to Giedi Prime basically to have sex with Fade and to get pregnant from Fade so that
Hmm.
the Bene Gesserit can like
Need that
keep
DNA.
keep and protect Fade's DNA because he's from the breeding program. He has these special genes. He, you know, that genetic material is useful for producing the Kwisatz Haderach. But something that it took me a while to understand is that like in the last chapter before Paul fights Fade, Jessica says, "Hey Paul, there's this trigger word, this hypnotic implanted trigger word that the Bene Gesserit put in people sometimes in case we ever have to kill them. And this word is Uroshnor. And if
Hmm.
you say Uroshnor to Fade, he will be weakened so you can kill him easier." And Paul
Hmm.
says, "I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a fair fight."
I'm gonna say it.
But it took me a while to realize that Margot must have implanted that trigger word in Fade when they hooked up.
It makes perfect sense.
And
Yeah.
it's something that it's never explained in the book, but it just sort of makes sense that happened then. Um
I don't
and
think I've ever thought about that, but that makes the most sense.
yeah, right?
Hmm.
So that's something that they could do in the movie because they do seem to be showing us Fade and Margot's encounter in this movie in a way that we don't see in the book.
And it would help illustrate the Bene Gesserit powers
Yeah,
a little bit more if we show something like that.
yeah,
We show the strength of their conditioning, show the strength of what they can like do to a person's mind if you let them in.
yeah, yeah. Agreed. Because yeah, like we've seen Jessica beat up Stilgar and like, ooh, the Bene
Use the
Gesserit
boys.
can fight, but like, the point is that the Bene Gesserit have powers that are better than violence, and that is emotional,
Hmm.
psychological, linguistic, perceptual, religious. Like they have so much more than just punching people. So yeah, I hope
Yeah.
Margot shows us that. Um, we got to see Siege to Beer in the trailers, which I thought was really cool.
Oh
There's like
yeah.
this vast shot where we get to see the crowds, the like thousands and thousands of Fremen in this massive crowd, which I thought was extremely cool. There's also this weird shot of it. What looks like Paul walking forwards with like a sandworm exploding out of the ground behind him. I think.
Yeah.
What do you make of
Yeah.
that?
So that's interesting because Paul can't necessarily control sandworms in the way that, someone like Leto the Second or even later like Shiana could.
Yeah,
So I don't really know what to make of that. Perhaps it's a vision, or perhaps we're seeing. I don't know, because even if he was about to mount the sandworm to charge into attack, he wouldn't be standing directly in front of it. It doesn't like practically make sense.
yeah.
So yeah, I maybe it's a vision. Someone's saying it doesn't look like Paul. Maybe it's Aaliyah. I don't know.
It, it
I'm
it's
not sure.
it seems to be a moment of like total confidence. Like it's a cool guys
Yeah.
don't look at explosions moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so this is not Paul's first encounter with a sandworm. Like I wonder if this is like Paul summoning the sandworms for the final attack on the Emperor at the end, which is a kind of a logical thing for them to do, but it's not something that's in the book. Interesting
It
choice if
makes
that's what's
sense on a
happening.
certain level. It
Yeah,
makes sense to a certain degree. But then again, it makes more sense for Leto because, the sand trout skin and the fact that he actually is Fremen, genetically speaking. So, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see. It might just be like an interesting stylistic visual choice that they made in the moment.
yeah. I mean, it certainly looks cool for the trailer.
Yeah.
Speaking of sand trout, I thought this costume that Irulan is in is pretty interesting because just visually, with the little sort of blobs all over her
The
body
little
and
sectional pieces.
surrounding her face, yeah, it kind of resembles Leto and the sand trout, don't you think?
The way it's described in the book, for sure, because he talks about how it's just like his face that you can see. Like he didn't let it like cover his face, and that's all that's like really left by the end. So yeah, it does kind of it is a little bit reminiscent of that. Yeah, that looks cool.
And again, it almost looks like armor, and it's similar to this other costume
I
she
was thinking
has
that
with
too.
like the chainmail. Do you think
It's
Irulan will
almost
fight?
like probably not. And in fact, I think I can compare it to almost like Cersei, right? Like in Game of
Yeah,
Thrones, the show, the way they do her dresses is they're like using armor to make it look more like I don't know. I don't even know what the word is, but it kind of reminds me of that. It's not. This is way more like extreme. Like Cersei didn't do like the headpieces and stuff like that, but it kind of made me think of that a little bit.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a good
I don't see Irulan as a
comparison.
fighter. Like Irulan is a scholar. I don't see her as a fighter.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, like she's the person who writes the books about Paul, and she's got literary pretensions or whatever the term is in the book. So yeah, it is weird seeing her as this armored badass is what she looks like, and it's so weird seeing. Like I'm still not sure if like this figure on the right here in this shot approaching. I guess this is the captive Shishakli, and
Hmm.
is this Irulan facing Shishakli? Is Irulan on Arrakis with soldiers like trying to find Paul?
That
Like
would
that?
be that'd be different.
Yeah, that'd
I
be a
mean,
huge change.
the background in Irulan doesn't look like it's in a rock cave, though.
Yeah,
It
it's
looks a
got
little
that
metallic.
It's like horizontal lights. Maybe that
Hmm.
would not be in this cave. The editing is yeah, it's ambiguous.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Hmm.
But I know with trailers, they do weave together shots to make it sometimes look like certain things are happening when they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. They can definitely be misleading. Thanks for the super chat from Trent, who says that the Dune 2000 real-time strategy game introduced House Ordos, a very underrated game. The cutscenes were very campy, like the series. Have you played that game?
I never played it. Unfortunately, a lot of people have been recommending it to me for years, but I have not played it.
Yeah, I think I've seen some clips from the cutscenes. They do look very hilarious and fun and cool.
Yeah.
Be cool to check it out, but I imagine that game may have dated poorly after all these years.
Yeah. I was never a fan of games like that. I mean, I played Sim City, but like the really
Classic.
like yeah, the really in-depth like strategy games like were over my head.
Not a big StarCraft guy.
No. God, no. I couldn't do StarCraft.
Thanks also for Cryos23's super chat. I feel like we should wrap this stream up shortly. We've
Hmm.
been talking for 2 hours. But there's one thing I would like to discuss, which is amidst all the the highbrow philosophy of Dune, all the clever deep questions that it asks. I think there's one question that is completely ridiculous and dumb, but I want to think about it. I want to think about it anyway, which is who is the best fighter in Dune? Who is the strongest warrior who could beat anyone else? Who do you think is the greatest warrior in Dune?
Thought you were gonna say what are chair dogs. So we'll answer this question instead.
What does Sligs
The
taste
biggest
like?
so in the first book, or are we talking the whole saga?
Yeah, I feel like those are two distinct questions. Who is the greatest
Okay.
fighter in the first Dune book, and secondarily, who is the best fighter in the entire series?
First Dune book, Duncan, Idaho.
Mm,
I would say that Duncan, Idaho would probably come out ahead if he really, really wanted to. I feel like Paul would give him a good fight, but I think Duncan, Idaho might take it out. And as far as like the whole Dune series, best fighter, like hand-to-hand combat, it's got to be Marbella.
mm.
Or I guess maybe Miles Teg once he gets that crazy superpower. But like, other than that, Marbella probably.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Mabella's got to be one of the most skilled combatants because, like, we see that towards the end, and and like philosophically, like, she is the combination of Honored Matre's powers and wisdom combined with Bene Gesserit training and restraint, and it's like logically, that's like the combination of the best ideas and the best minds makes you the best fighter. That's kind of the philosophy of fighting in Dune. It's all about the mind. So like I think Mabella makes sense. But yeah, as you say, like Miles Teg becomes the Flash, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's that bit where like Miles Teg just runs into a Honored Matre's place and he just turns all the Honored Matres into red mist because
Into
he moves
nothing.
so much faster. Like they don't have the speed force and he does. So like I tend to think that Teg with his speed powers could beat Mabella, even if Mabella is like,
Yeah.
theoretically the most like highly trained fighter.
Agreed. So what about for the first Dune book, in your opinion?
Well, I see. I want to say Duncan, but there is a bit in the later books where Gurney says, or Duncan says, that Gurney was a better fighter than him. Gurney can beat
Ah,
Duncan 6 times out of 10. So I think that textually Gurney's meant to be a better fighter. I mean, of course, the later Gola resurrections of
he
Duncan,
gets upgraded.
he gets upgraded. So, Duncan is on a higher tier in the later books. But, like, for the first book, Gurney is meant to be better than Duncan. My question in the first book, though, is, like, is Paul and Hassimir better than Gurney, because we are told that Hasemi is better than Paul.
Hmm.
But is Paul and Hasemi better than Gurney? Because like it's funny because like some of the later books suggest that Paul really was one of the best fighters ever, but like the actual people who Paul fights are Jamis, who's just like this average Fremen guy, and Fade, who is this treacherous Harkonnen, but like Fade is not a top tier fighter as far as anyone
He's
seems
been
to
cheating
believe.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and he mostly fights like slaves that have been drugged, so
Slaves.
they're easy to kill.
Yeah.
So we never see Paul fight someone who's really meant to be a top tier fighter. So it's really hard to know if Paul is better or worse than Gurney.
True. Definitely true. Yeah, but because I guess you can, by the end of the book, it's pretty clear that Paul has improved as a fighter, but you can't really know like how much, yeah, in comparison to somebody like Gurney, who's also been like out here in the trenches fighting the entire time and no doubt like improving his skills too. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean Gurney's weird as well because Gurney, we are told is one of the best fighters in the universe, but we don't see him fight anyone except for like book 3 when he kills like Jarvid or someone. He kills some Fremen guy, but like,
Javid.
but he's not a particularly strong fighter as far as we know. So it's like, so it's
Yeah.
really funny that like there's all these top and like Hasimir as well is apparently one of the best ever, but we never see him fight anyone.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I feel Denis Villeneuve has got to give us that big Gurney moment. You got to give Gurney his moment. Like
Yeah.
Duncan got his like awesome moment. We got to give it to Gurney too.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought some of Gurney's like fight scenes in the first movie were like a bit underwhelming. Like he sort of like kills a couple of Harkonnen red
We don't
shirts.
see much.
Yeah, we really don't see much. I mean, the training scene with Paul was pretty cool, but yeah, I hope we get more.
Yeah. One of the things I would have loved to see, I think I mentioned this before in one of my streams or something. I would have loved to see in the first movie, the Atreides soldiers get trapped in the cave because I feel like that's a really like
Yeah,
devastating thing that happens. That like it shows you how cruel the Harkonnens really are. It was a devastating moment, and I don't know. It just highlights their cruelty.
yeah, for sure. And it also has like an interesting sort of technological story to it. Like it's a fun idea that like the Harkonnens are bringing back this like ancient technology of like this ballistic artillery, and it's a
Hmm.
surprise. It's like bringing a blunderbuss to a modern conflict or
Like,
something.
wait,
It's
what?
like,
What are you doing?
yeah, and it fits this whole idea of, yeah, it's all about surprises and tricks and mind games. And so, you know, I can imagine it almost as like, I mean, I don't think they'll do it, but it could be a cool opening scene to Dune Part 2 to like have the Atreides soldiers, you know, trapped in the caves and going, oh, these Harkonnens have taken over the planet. Oh, how are we going to escape? You know, and then just getting caved by these artillery strikes, and then the
Brutal.
Baron, you know, gloating from afar. I think all of that could be fun to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brutal.
All right. I guess we better wrap up this stream. Are there any sort of last thoughts you have about Dune that you want to say? Anything else you're looking forward to?
I'm just looking forward to seeing the movie when it comes out, and I'm very excited about it. And I hope it doesn't get postponed to 2024, like some of the rumors were saying, because I think that the time they have set is the best time to do it.
Yeah.
People are hyped about it. You've already released 2 trailers, and I think it would be a bad idea to postpone it. I'm just excited to see it and the way it ends, and I'm excited to see all the performances and hopefully a killed navigator. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
been a
Me
lot of
too.
fun having this chat. Anytime.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this was great. Thank you for coming on, and I hope we can chat again after the new movie comes out.
Totally. Sounds like fun.
And
And thanks
everyone,
everybody for watching and listening.
yeah. And go and subscribe to Quinn's Ideas on YouTube if you haven't already. Link in the description. And also check out Quinn's new podcast, Cosmic
Thank you guys.
Chronicles. Check it
Cosmic
out.
Chronicles.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Thank you so much, Quinn. All right. That was fun. Uh, we're going to wrap this up. I'll respond to this super chat from Bert, who says, have you watched Invincible? Series is great, but the comics are incredible. Yeah, no, I haven't seen or read Invincible. I've heard good things. Also, what's that other superhero thing? The Boys. That was another, I think, similar-ish show, sort of gritty, dark superhero thing that people keep telling me to watch. I watched like the first season of The Boys and kind of enjoyed it. Lived through the comic, seemed kind of cool, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like Watchmen is like as much gritty superhero stuff as I need. So yeah, haven't checked out much other superhero stuff since. And thank you for the super chat from Jordan, who says, love you, Swift. Well, you know, Alt Shift X isn't here. I'm Alt Shift X. You know, I don't know what that Swift person is all about, but I'll pass on your kind words. Thank you so much for everybody. We are now working on a big video about Jon Snow, the real Jon Snow. Looking forward to finishing that. We will also do more Dune stuff later on. Philosophy of Dune, the real Dune, part 2. Looking forward to doing that stuff. House of the Dragon, we're going to cover when the second season comes out. Might also do some more House of the Dragon stuff before then. So yeah, more Song of Ice and Fire, more Hot D, more Dune, more other stuff. Looking forward to it. Please press like and subscribe if you haven't. If you'd like to support Alt Shift X, you can sign up to the Patreon. Patrons get videos early, usually like 24 hours before the public release. There's also a monthly live stream for live stream tier patrons, which is like an hour of chatting about the videos that are in production. And it's a great way to support Alt Shift X, and I really appreciate all the patronage. Check out Quinn's channel and Quinn's podcast. There's also an Alt Shift X podcast. There's actually 2 Alt Shift X podcast feeds. One with podcast chats and live streams, and one with the main Alt Shift X videos as audio. So you can listen to all the Alt Shift X stuff on Spotify or podcast apps if you'd like. Links are in the description. But yeah, thank you for the support, and we will do more cool stuff soon. Thanks, guys.